Morning. Oh, definitely. Brent Westmoreland. Okay. All right. So you developed and so forth. Oh yeah, that's where I live. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Oh, okay. All right.
Morning, sir. Pretty good. How about you, sir? Good to see you guys.
Morning, Bob.
Bien, gracias a Dios. Ahí andamos. Sí, todo bien, gracias a Dios.
Ernesto,
Ahí anda trabajando. Si apenas nació.
selling cars now.
También, ¿no? It's like a legal brief. It's not brief, though.
No, it's not brief.
Smokes.
Jeez. I mean, it's like so far I've read to this page. You should repeat yourself 3 times on this page already. So I don't know.
But you know,
So how many people do we have signed up for that?
Just 4 or 5.
Okay, yeah. Mary and I are probably gonna do it. She's decided that we need to replace all the windows in our house. Okay.
Testing, testing.
RNE? Okay,
Ready? We're live.
and that's for the.
Okay, are we ready, Janine? And then can you close the back doors for us, please? Thank you.
Oh, perfect. You know what? Can you just hand it to the commissioners?
Right.
And here, that way they know to sign it. Thank you. Yeah. We're not live yet.
Thank you. Okay.
On these T2 zones,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to do take corrective action in some of them, you know what I mean?
It's pretty wide open, isn't it?
It's terrible. All right. I apologize for the inconvenience. We had a little technical problem, so we have a distinguished guest with us today regarding a water issue, Dr. Sam Fernald. And what we'll do, we'll go through the first case, and then you're next, okay? I know you're very busy, so I apologize for this delay. Okay, welcome everybody to this meeting of August 22, 2024. And if you have cell phones, please turn them off or put them on silent. Thank you. Roll call of officers, please.
Commissioner Uranga,
Here.
Commissioner Lear,
Here.
Commissioner Jimenez, Commissioner Fisher,
Here.
Vice Chair Zerniak,
Here.
Chair Acosta.
Present. Commissioner Jimenez, is he online or not?
He actually just messaged that he had an emergency and wouldn't be
All right.
able to
Okay,
attend.
thank you. Item number 2, approval or changes to the agenda. The chair entertains a motion.
I'll move we approve the agenda as presented.
I second.
We have a motion on the floor. It's been second. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion? Roll call, please.
You can do it by voice vote. We can just do it by voice vote.
All right. We approve it by unanimous.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
thank you. Item number 3, approve.
Wait. Yes, for a voice vote. Just all those in favor say
Oh, okay. Sorry, we're going so fast here. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those in, the ayes, all those opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 3, approval of minutes of the meeting of June 27, 2024.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion on the floor. It's been second. All those that are in favor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Item B, the meeting of August 8, 2024.
So moved.
Second?
Yeah.
All right. We have a motion on the floor. It's been second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those that are in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 4, old business. Janine? No old business, Mr. All right. Item number 5, new business. Case number V24-001.
Good morning.
All right.
Good morning.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Charlene Santisteban, 845 North Motel Boulevard, Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give today is the truth under penalty of law?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chair.
Good morning.
Okay, this is case number variance V24011. The owners are Jorge Mendoza and Monica Calcidares. I can't pronounce it, sorry. Calcidares. The zoning is a T2 rule, and it's a variance to wall height. They have an 8-foot fence, well, 7 to 8 foot, where a 6 foot is allowed. This is the location map. It's near Santa Teresa. It's way out there. This is the aerial of the property. The subject property is a 2.5 acre parcel located within a T2 rural zone and currently has an approximately 7 to 8 foot high rock wall on the side and rear of the subject property. The surrounding area is rural with large parcels developed as single-family residential. The rock wall was built approximately 5 feet from the property line with the idea of creating a double perimeter fence. Access to the property is on West Hill Drive, a paved private road with platted 50-foot right-of-way. And this is a close-up of the parcel. And if you can see, my mouse, you can see the fence. This is the fence around here. You can see it. And this is the zoning map. You see it's mostly T2 out there. The applicant purchased the property on May 14th, 2015. The property was littered with trash from neighboring properties. The applicant installed a 6-foot chain link fence to keep his property free from the debris and trash coming onto his property. The neighbor to the north has unrestrained dogs that show aggression. The dogs dug under the 6-foot chain link fence. The applicant reinforced the fence with wooden planks where the dogs dug and replaced the dog, put wooden planks and replaced the dirt. The dogs dug where there were no wooden planks to get under the fence. The applicant installed concrete foundation for the fence. The dogs jumped the chain link fence, so they went with a rock wall and decided to go higher. The applicant has young children, ages 6, 4, and 8. There are 3 occasions when the sheriff's department came to the property inquiring about shots being fired. Another neighbor goes on a go-kart with weapons and shoots his weapons. Another neighbor has accumulated solid waste and junk vehicles on their property. He burns trash that concerns the applicant due to wildfires. This is the overall site plan. You can see the fence right here. And this is also, it's the plat of survey. Public notification, 12 letters were sent out July 26th, ads in the paper July 25th, signs were posted on the property, and no opposition letters or support were received. These are the notification signs, and this is the front of the property, and this is the area of notification. This is the subject property. This is the front entrance going in. It's very nice. And this is the rock wall, and this is the north rock wall, and you can see that there's some space between the wall and the neighbor's wall. On the other side, you can see the spacing better. And this is the other side. This is the south side wall, and that's between the rock wall. It's within their property. And this, let's see. This is the south side. Okay, this is the rear. You can barely see the wall on the back there. You can see it. I couldn't get on the property, so I had to take it from the fence. And this is across from the property. It's a vacant lot. And this is West Hill Drive, south and north. And our criteria. Agency comments, DAC Engineering says they require a SWIP is required for location as the property is completely was disturbed. No DAC zoning codes, there were no permits for buildings or the rock wall. Complaint received for the brightness of lights that violate the New Mexico night sky light. That's how this came to us. DAC Building Services, engineer drawings for the rock wall are submitted for review. Building permits are required for the rock wall and buildings, and it'll be triple feed. Findings, the variance will not constitute a grant or special privilege inconsistent with the limitations or other properties in the area of notice. This is from the UDC. The variance will not be detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare, or be materially injurious to properties or improvements in the area of notice. There is a physical hardship resulting from the size or shape of the parcel, or from existing structures on the parcel, or from topographical or physical conditions on the site or in the area of notice, and hardship is not self-imposed. And the variance upholds the purpose and intent of this chapter, public safety and welfare are secured and substantial justice is done. So my findings are the applicant states on number one, the applicant states he wants to protect his family from unkept yard and accumulated solid waste and junk vehicles from his neighbor to the north of him. The neighbor to the north burns trash. Applicant built an 8-foot wall to protect his family aggressive dogs that are not confined to their owner's property. The applicant is concerned for the safety of the young children. Number two, the applicant built a chain link fence, and all of this, it was in my packet. The dogs show aggression, so the dogs dug under and did all that stuff, and so he decided to go with a higher fence. And also a coyote came into their property and took their little Yorkie dog and killed it. So they're concerned about the wild animals in the area, wildlife. Number three, the property does not meet the standards due to the size and shape of the parcel. However, the remote rural nature of the area is needed to protect the family from wildlife. Number four, due to concerns of the narrative and variance would constitute protection to the applicant and public safety. And staff findings, the property is outside of any incorporated municipal zoning authority and is within Doña County. And Doña, pursuant to 350-104, administrative authority and duties, Planning and Zoning Commission may receive and hear them make this case. Public notifications were met, and the variance is consistent with health, safety, and general welfare. And pursuant to 350, Table 5.4, site standards on T2 zones. The findings, the criteria is not requesting a special privilege inconsistent with the UDC. They are concerned with the protection and safety of their children and property. The height of the wall is not detrimental to surrounding properties and will meet the criteria of health, safety, and welfare. The height of the rock wall is added protection from stray bullets in the area. I requested a list of calls for service from the Sheriff's Department. From August 2019 through July 2024, there have been 75 calls in service for that street. The calls were for shots fired, at least 25 plus calls for fire and shots fired. There were at least 5 calls for animals wild and stray, and 10 calls for disturbance and loud music. And there was many other ones. Due to the concerns from the narrative, the DAC Sheriff's report and variance will constitute protection to the applicant and public safety. These are the findings. All outdoor lighting fixtures installed after January 1st, 2000, this is for the night sky, shall be shielded except incandescent fixtures that emit 1,800 lumens or less are angled downward at least 45 degrees. Staff recommendations, conditional approval is my recommendation. And they've already submitted engineered drawings for the rock wall, obtained building permits for the rock wall and other structures on the property, and of course, fix the outdoor lighting to fix the New Mexico Night Sky Act, and the applicant will pay a triple fee for permits. And this concludes my presentation. Yes,
Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, any questions of staff?
So who filed the complaint about the lighting?
I don't know. That came to codes. I didn't check with them. I just know that it came in from codes, and that's how we got this case.
And you're saying that they need to obtain building permits for other structures on the property?
Yes, they have a
What's that?
gazebo and a pump house, and I don't know, it's like a garage or a storage area. And they have the rough in for their house, there, and that they haven't built the house yet. So that's something that they will be getting with their building permits. It's isolated, it's way out there.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the paperwork that we got, it shows that the property is in Chaparral.
It's not in Chaparral. I know,
Okay.
that's a mistake. It is in Santa Teresa.
Okay, so I don't know if we need to correct those minutes or not, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. During your presentation, you referred to this as a rock wall.
Yes.
From the pictures, it looked like it was a white cinder block wall.
No, yes, it is a white cinder. It's a rock wall, but it's plastered with white and painted white.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So is it a solid wall all the way around the property? I thought I saw parts of it where they had put in metal in between.
Yes, that's the front of the property, the very front. And the way the fence is built, it's on the sides it comes and then it scales down to go to the front. So it has a scaling up to go all the way to the back.
So what's the height at the front of the property?
It's a 4-foot wall with the slats in between and the columns.
Okay.
I have a question. When were the walls that do not meet compliance built?
I don't know that. Because he didn't get a building permit, so I don't know. You can ask the applicant.
So
He
you
has
don't
his
know
own
if it was
presentation.
before 2017 or after?
I don't know.
Okay.
We'll get him to come here in a minute.
Okay, thank you. He said it was after 2017.
After.
Any further
Yes.
questions of staff, commissioners? Thank you very much. We may have, ask you
He-
to come back again.
The applicant is a contractor in El Paso. He builds in El Paso. And in the county, they don't require building permits. So he assumed that it would be the same thing in New Mexico, and that's why he didn't come for the permits. Okay,
All right, thank you. Thank you.
okay.
Mr. Mendoza? Would you please step forward? And Ms. Casadillas? We're going to swear you in.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, committee and everybody present here.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Jorge Rios Mendoza.
Monica
Go ahead.
Monica Calzadillas.
My current address is 816 Sun City Park Court, El Paso, Texas, 79932.
My current address is 816 Sun City Park Court, El Paso, Texas, 79932.
Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give today is the truth under penalty of law?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you
morning.
for being here. This case was postponed earlier, and do you know, you asked staff to postpone the case to have corrective action on the rock wall? No? No?
sir.
Okay, all right,
Not to my knowledge, no,
all
sir.
right, all right.
Whatever they asked for, they had asked if we had engineering plans and some other items, which my husband was working with them
Right,
for a while, and he had the engineer draw up, and, they went back and forth, making corrections so that everything was done correctly.
sure. Okay. Did the building inspector visit your property in the last, Sean, are you here?
No, I don't think he is.
Well, we'll ask you to come forward after a while, okay? Give us your presentation, please.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. When we bought this land, it was just bare land. We wanted to build our dream home there. And we noticed that there was just empty. If you could see, we had a shed. That was the only thing that came with it, with the property. It was almost falling apart. Our well is in there. There was a water tank that was completely mantled. I mean, somebody got in there and vandalized, stole the tank. So we noticed right away that this area might get, stolen or something. So we built that shed to standards to withstand time and to be adequate for our land, for our house. We went ahead and we noticed that there were a lot of loose dogs there. The neighbors, they have no control of their dogs. I don't see them no more now, but there was a pit bull and a what was it, German Shepherd, that even a gentleman that I spoke to that lives on the other street, he walks his dogs, and those dogs kept attacking this gentleman, and I told him, why don't you report these dogs? And he's like, no, it's okay, I don't wanna bother any of my neighbors. So what we did is we made a decision of putting a 6-foot chain link fence around our perimeter. I asked the neighbors if that would be okay. They said, as long as you don't come to our perimeter. So what we did is we put that chain link fence inside our land by about 8 to 10 inches. It's not actually in the perimeter wall. We actually came into our land. On the front, we decided to do a rock wall, being that so it could be safer for my kids to be walking around there and doing all this, playing around, that they would go and help us out clean our land. From there, we had no intentions of building a secondary wall. We just decided this is more than enough of what we need. But we did notice that our neighbors like to keep trash. I mean, I guess it's because it's 2.5 acres and they think they could just come. My neighbor next to me on the south, he's a contractor. He's got broken tile there. He's got wood planks. He's got tires. He's got all these things. And we came across where we came with 4 snakes. It was 3 rattlesnakes, and then what was the other one? She thinks it was a coral snake that we had to kill because our children are just playing around there and we have to protect our kids. Then we had the neighbor's dogs to the south jump our fence while they were digging under our fence. And it didn't matter whatever we did, they just kept coming. I don't know what was over here, that they just kept coming over here and over here. I mean, we just got tired of it. We started putting wood planks, we started putting cinder block. Then we decided to move forward and put concrete, but we cannot put concrete all the way through because that would be too expensive. From there, we just decided, you know what? We need a secondary wall. I do apologize to everyone. I did not know we needed permits to build on the county. I'm a contractor from El Paso, Texas. I do commercial work. And on the county in Texas, you don't need a permit. And when we came over here, I thought, I asked people around, I said, do you need a permit to build it when you build your house? And 2 people said no. So I said, okay. So we went ahead and started doing our construction. During these years, I had nobody visit my site to tell me, excuse me, sir, what you're doing is incorrect. You need to correct this. You need a permit, you need to go to the city, nothing. So we just went ahead and continued doing our building there. When we decided to do our secondary walls, when we had her favorite dog, which is a Yorkie, that we're playing around with my children, and out of nowhere, this coyote comes into our property and wants to attack one of my children, and the Yorkie defends my child, and she got killed. And it was just, she was devastated. She just was, we need something to protect our children. We cannot live we cannot build our dream home here if we're just gonna stay with that chain link fence and everything's just, I mean, there's desert after that south resident, it's just plain desert. It goes all the way from there to Artcraft, where people ride their their ATVs with loud music, shooting guns. I have pictures, I don't know. You could keep clicking there. Do I click here?
Do we control it from here?
There's the way we got the land, we started cleaning it up. Do we change it here? There's a rock wall where, oh, this arrow?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, I'm sorry. There's a rock wall when we started doing,
One down.
okay, sorry. There's a rock wall when we started building it. There's a height of our rock wall in front of the perimeter. That's a front of I'm sorry, what? Yes, that's a front wall. Okay, that's a rock wall. That's a chain link fence around our property. As you can see, we built the pump room. That's a little room right there. We built it accordingly to withstand time. As you can see, that's a 4th snake right there that we had killed. I mean, that scares a child. Here are the people working on still on the chain link fence. That's a perimeter wall that I mentioned, that we are still in our property about 8 to 10 inches into our land. It's not actually a perimeter wall, a perimeter barrier. So there's a chain link fence.
There they can see where you started putting all the rock on the
Yeah,
because
as you
they
can
had
see,
already
if you
started.
see on the bottom of that chain link fence, there's a lot of rock where the dogs were coming in. It was just time consuming, and it was just tiring of trying to keep these dogs flying from, getting from the other man's property. And I even talked to him, I said, why don't you restrain them? He says, I'm not gonna restrain them, they're in my property. So these are the pine trees. I just want you to see this because these are the pine trees that we had no intention of building a secondary wall. That was our perimeter wall. That's what we were gonna stay with, and our rock wall in the front. But as time went by, the trees keep growing. I don't know if you see that. The trees keep growing, the time keeps going by, and we still have all these incidents with all these animals. And then we heard, I was looking for it, I cannot find it, but even on the news it came out on Fox, where there was a mountain lion close to Santa Teresa Airport. I kept looking for that, but I couldn't find it to bring it to you this morning. We put a playground for my kids there for them to play around. There it is. It's a commercial playground. We built it for them so it could be safe. As you could notice on the background, the chain link fence is still there. Those are our dogs, they're the Great Danes. No need for a secondary wall, but too many incidents. That's Scooby and Thor. There's our dog. The coyote came in, killed our dog by defending one of our child. Okay, so it was just devastating. There's a dog, my wife's favorite pet. Pepper. I said.
Pepper.
Oh. There's this other incident where we have two schnauzers that live with us in our other home, and we brought them over to the land, and out of nowhere, I don't know where I don't know the residents there, they just have no control of their pets. I don't know, I think it's because they have a big land. But another dog just came out of nowhere, and I don't know if you see the hole here by the mouth. It just bit Molly, our female schnauzer. We had to take her to the vet and get everything straightened out, but we just got tired. Our dog, Thor, also got attacked by another pet. I don't know if you see his leg there. This is our neighbor to the north. There's a junk cars right there. He's got trash. I don't know if you see where he burns debris there. It's all burned right there in front of the cars. He's
Right here. I don't know.
right there.
That's all the ashes from what he burns. And those are the cars, and those vehicles are maybe anywhere from 15 to 20 feet from the fence.
From the fence. You see, and also, we noticed that this gentleman already had a rock wall. That's why we decided to go. I said, well, might as well just go with the same thing. There's all the debris. This gentleman, when we bought the land, the gentleman to the south, he would throw bottles into our land when nobody owned it. I mean, there was just a pile of broken glass. He likes to drink. That's a contractor that I tell you. Ever since we bought the land, he stopped doing that, but now he keeps all the bottles and trash in front of his property. There is a separation between our chain link fence and our wall. If you notice, before, when we built this chain link fence, there was nothing against it. Now this gentleman started putting a bunch of trash against it. So that gives a leeway for his pets to get on the wood and jump my fence. Yeah, he's always had junk there, but he never against our fence. As you can see here, this is where, after our neighbor, it's just open land. It's just a desert for any wild animal or anything to come into our property. There's, every weekend you can go there and you're gonna hear shots fired. I don't think a child of 4 years old could recognize different guns, from a gun to an assault rifle to a shotgun. My son already knows. From all the fires, from all the people that just go there, riding their ATVs and shooting, it's just unreal. We needed to protect our family. We needed to do something about it. There it is. It goes all the way to our craft. There's a shooting range by our craft where people are allowed to shoot. That's kind of far from us, but people, since they're trails, they just think they could go on their ATVs and go on there. They burn trash there on that open area. There are the shells that are close to our house, to our land. I'm sorry. This is the back of our wall that we built, and you can see these gentlemen have horses. These gentlemen have horses, and they don't do nothing with their land. They just built their home and they leave it like desert. So I need to protect my family as much as I can. There's a fire from my neighbor on the south. There's an open fire, flames really close. That's about 15 feet away from my perimeter wall. As you could see, the pine trees are already pretty big now. If that fire catches any of my trees, they're all gonna burn down. They're all just gonna start catching on fire. I thought that you needed some permission or something to burn, but everybody on those lands, they just burn their trash. And here we have another picture to the gentleman on the north, my other neighbor, also burning. No idea why. When we decided to do our secondary wall, we went around the neighborhood to see, like, okay, what can we build? What would be a good height? That's on Kugo Road. That's the one that's off my street. That wall right there is about 15 feet high. It's a rock wall. So I figured I don't want to build a wall that high. This gentleman, he's a truck driver, I guess he got a permit to allow his 18-wheelers to go to Kugo and park his 18-wheelers. That wall is 8 feet high. This one here, this is about 12 feet high. This gentleman's got a cinder block wall, and that's about 9 feet high. So, as you can see here, my trees are big. We did, and I do apologize again, I did not know you needed permits. I did build a garage, I did build some gazebos. That's it. I was not gonna build a house until I got stopped by a gentleman by zoning and said, you know what, we got called over here. Do you have permits for all your structures? And I said, I do apologize, sir. It was a lady and a gentleman. And I said, I do apologize, I did not know I needed permits. I thought I only needed permits to build my house. I did not know that I needed permits for everything else. He says, no, you need permits for everything. As soon as they visit me, I came down here, I paid my permits, I started showing the plans. When they told me about the house, that I did need a permit for the house, they told me that I didn't need any engineering, any architecture. As long as the plans were built to a scale, it would be okay. I went ahead and went to the architect I know. I told him, can you draw me something up nice? Because I want to build a nice home there. It's about a 7,500 square foot home. So I said, okay, you know what, can you draw up the plans? I brought them over here. We did the engineering. We have done the engineering stamps on absolutely all the structures already, including on the secondary wall. They have been submitted here to the permit office. This is just so you could see that I had to get another contractor, to come and put screening so these dogs, because these dogs kept coming in, even though we had that wall, but they couldn't go anywhere because the whole wall goes around the land, so they cannot come in. So they just come in and then they will go back. Then they will come in and they will go back. So I told them, can you put some sort of barrier so these dogs can stop digging, and if they come, I'll call the neighbor for him to come pick them up. Ever since we put this secondary wall, we have not seen snakes, we have not seen coyotes, we have not seen any dogs in my property. My kids are safe, they feel safe in their land. Now I feel confident to build a home there where I know they're gonna be safe, and generations to come, I don't know, my grandkids we're gonna be okay. We're not gonna be wondering where are they, if they're gonna be safe, if a snake's gonna pop out. I do apologize about the lights. When I put the lights up, it was just land. And the reason why I put the lights, instead of going down, I put them up like this. And the reason for that is so when we would go, we would be able to see anything moving on our land and say, well, there's a snake, there's a tarantula, there's an animal. So we did bring them down now. You know, we're good with that. And this is our secondary wall. This is what the land looks like now. That's the wall to the back.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Commissioners, do you have anything, any questions of Mr. Mendoza?
So what percent of the wall is solid as opposed to having the metal railing? So is the wall solid around 3/4 of the property and the front is different?
Correct.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the one that Ms. Charlene presented in her photos, and I don't know if we
Please,
have it.
please
also.
get
At
closer to the
the
mic.
front,
Yeah.
it's the rock wall, which is what, like 3 feet, and then like you said, the metal going across so you can clearly look inside. It's only surrounding it, like he said, it encloses it around.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So I saw all the trash that was lined up against your chain link fence
Correct.
from the neighbor.
Yes.
So you said you built that chain link fence still inside of your property? So is he kind of encroaching on your property with the trash?
No, sir, and my apologies. What I meant is I put that chain link fence there.
That's actually on your property
Yes,
line?
so it's on my property, so when I built that chain link fence, he had trash on his side, but now he's again, so he is actually on my land, but I'm just not saying anything, I'm just like, leave it alone. But that trash is against my chain link fence.
Understood, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any further questions of Mr. or Ms. Casadias? No? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We may have you come back again, so, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sean?
Good morning. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sean Vick, 845 North Motel Boulevard.
Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give today is the truth under penalty of law?
I do.
Thank you. And then you can raise the mic.
Good morning, Commissioners.
It appears to me that there's a lot of code violations next door neighbors. Maybe possibly even encroachment into Mr. Mendoza's property.
Based on the pictures, it appears that way, yes, sir.
So has codes ever approached the neighbors by chance?
I'm unaware if codes has approached the neighbors with any violations, trash or anything like that. I'd have to speak to them.
And for me, it just appears selective enforcement, okay? I could be wrong, but
I don't know. I don't know if I'd see it that way. I think we have a violation. We have a large county. If we drive around, even inspectors, our codes personnel and codes enforcement, whether it be environmental or, we all do what we can. We take a look, we see if there's building permits, if there's trash, we make a complaint. Most of the time, we're proactive. It's, okay, we get a complaint come in, we go out and we investigate. If we see something on the neighboring property, of course, we're gonna take a look and investigate it. It's just one of those things. This was noticed, so I don't know if they've spoken to any of the neighbors regarding any of those violations. And again, as the applicant stated, originally the trash was maybe more on their property and maybe not as noticeable. Now it's up against his fence. The other thing with codes enforcement is if they're basically limited to what they can see from the street. They can't get in the back of their pickup, they can't get on top of a ladder to look at those violations. So that's just one of the things. With the building department, if there's a building violation, we have a little bit more allowance on what we can do, because as a building official or inspectors, if we see a building that's in decay or electrical violation, we try to make contact with the property owner. However, if it's determined that it's a life safety issue or concern, then we can access a property or go to the sheriff's and get a warrant. So that's kind of where codes is limited, is what I want to say to the commission.
and according to building standards, the wall, he's the contractor, I'm sure he has a good footing for that rock wall.
You know, I just have to go along with the engineer drawings that were submitted. At this point is what we've asked for. I haven't asked for the footing to be dug up or around. I don't want to compromise the footing. So we have an engineer that signed off on the block wall. And as Dr. Zerniak did mention, it is a CMU wall. So it is concrete. And it looked a little off, as Charlene mentioned. The front is block with the metal. So we do have the engineered details on the wall, also on all the structures. The applicant, like he stated, as soon as he was cited, he did come in and he's been working with building services and his designer to bring everything up to code.
And we have, by staff, the conditions, right, on the conditional approval. Do you have any other conditions that you would like to add?
Not at this time, sir. No, he's complied with all the conditions that we've asked from building services, engineered drawings for the wall, for all of the structures. The main reason for him is you can see the little gazebo. You can see his garage, the metal carport that you're seeing here, the structures. So because we did not see them basically from the ground up, from the footing to the frame and everything, we're relying on the engineer to basically say, okay, yes, these met the applicable building codes at the time. If it was a residence or something that's going to be more habitable, then, you know, we may have to go in and remove some sheetrock and look at insulation values and look at some electrical. But in this case, these are accessory structures. One of the things that the applicant has to do is he has to have his home because the structures have to be accessory to something, the main dwelling. They just can't exist by themselves.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is the cost of the fee and the triple fee? I mean,
Commissioner Fisher, that's based on the value that the project cost. I don't have my permit
well,
fees.
is this triple fees that you're asking for, is that for the fence alone, or are you talking about all the permits they've asked for?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Or, that's the question.
Yes, ma'am. Every single structure, the fence, the gazebo, the garage, anything is a sole and separate permit. Each one of those has separate fees, and each one of them does have a triple fee attached to them.
And are your fees based on a percentage of the value of that structure?
Basically, yes, ma'am.
So that's a considerable triple fee.
Yes, ma'am.
Any further questions of Sean? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners.
And commissioners, like Mr. Mendoza stated, he says he would be willing to comply with standards and conditions that staff imposes. So come back, Mr. Mendoza, please.
Yes, sir.
First of all, are you in agreement with all that, to get your property back in, in compliance? And,
Yes.
and we realize that there's a lot of code violations within the area, but we don't discuss that, okay?
Yes, sir.
The issue in hand is, do you understand all the conditions that have been imposed regarding triple fees and compliance with building code ordinance?
Yes, sir.
And so what we'll do is, we're going to close it now. Thank you very much. We wanted to make sure that you understood that, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. You can go
Thank
ahead and sit down. Commissioners, you have any discussion before we have a motion? Well, true. Is there anybody in the gallery that would like to speak on behalf or opposed to this case proceeding forward? Okay, we're going to close it to the gallery. Commissioner Zerniak, I know you have a question.
I'm going to move approval of, conditional approval of case number V24-011 with the conditions as stated by staff based on findings of fact and the testimony given this morning.
Okay, we have a motion? Any second the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Does that, everybody understand the motion? All right,
With the conditions, triple fees.
everything, right. Yeah. Okay, any discussion on the motion? No discussion? All right, roll call, please.
And Commissioner Odanga?
Yes.
Commissioner Lear?
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yes.
Vice Chair Zerniak?
Yes.
Chair Acosta?
Yes. Okay. And if you have any other questions, Mr. Mendoza, before you leave, ask of staff, okay? Or Sean? Okay, thank you. We have a guest, that very important guest for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Ferdinand? Fernand? Can't see. You can step forward. We saw your biography. Thank you very much for attending. I know you're very busy. You've been with Water Management and current director for the Water Resources Research Institute. The areas of research include social hydrology, surface water, groundwater interactions, integrated human and natural systems, runoff and water quality process, forest management effects on water yields and watershed health, ecology of rangelands, regional water budgets, and groundwater management institutions. Thank you very much for attending. We really appreciate that. We have many, many questions to ask. One of them, but what I'll do is, you're going to give us a presentation on the overview in terms of water budget of the region, right?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and proceed. Thank
How
you.
many minutes would you like me to spend on this overview? Because I think the questions are probably pretty important, but I could spend, do you want me to spend about 20 minutes on this, or is that too much?
I think that's fine, Sam.
It's okay?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate, this is not in any way a burden for me, because we do a lot of work at the Water Research Institute for the Lower Rio Grande Planning Region, which coincides with Doña County. So actually, this is a really important venue for me and for our research institute and for New Mexico State University. So it's not in any way a burden for me to be here. I appreciate the chance to come talk to you. So this first overview is just to go through some of the big issues that you might not think about when you're thinking about planning for water resources. And first of all, we are in meteorological drought right now. If you look at the drought indicator map, southern New Mexico is in extreme drought. But this is based on precipitation and also dryness of soil moisture. There's a bigger issue that's kind of overwhelming water resources in this region, which is increased evapotranspiration. That's a combination of evaporation from, liquid water turning into vapor, from soil, from water, from plants, and transpiration, which is the water that plants use. They soak up through their roots and send to the atmosphere. And if you combine them, that's evapotranspiration. And in the last 40 years, that's gone up by 15% because of increasing temperatures. And it's expected to just keep going up another 15% in the next 40 years. So what that means is there's just this atmosphere that's demanding more and more water. So I just want to point that out, because some of the issues we talk about, like the legislation or the litigation with Texas, or even growing population, those are against a backdrop of just more atmospheric water demand. Infiltration and runoff, with aridification, there's actually less cover on the landscape. So the watersheds that surround our Mesilla Valley are more likely to have more water that does not soak into the ground and actually runs off over the surface. And what does that do? It causes more flooding, sediment problems, bacteria transported to the river, things like that. So we have some other challenges associated with more rapid and intense storms and more water that doesn't soak in. And by the way, we've had just some great work with John Gwynn and the county's flood control commission. So just a shout out to him and his work. I mentioned surface water flow. The Rio Grande is our, I noticed it's on the emblem of the county. And 85% of the water in the Rio Grande comes from the mountains of northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. And what's happening is there's increasing temperature that's causing less snowmelt runoff. And for a given amount of snowpack, we're getting into this region, we're already on the order like 10 to 20% less runoff for a given amount of snowpack. And that's expected to be 25% and up to 50% in the next 50 to 100 years. So we have a huge issue with less river water coming into our region. Again, the numbers are huge compared to the amount of water that we're looking at for meeting our population needs. Groundwater storage, so I'll show a graph, but with less surface water, there's more groundwater extraction. And I'll get into that a little bit more. And recharge also I'll talk about, but that's a real opportunity for us if we can recharge the aquifer we depend on. That's really good for long term. Not yet, I'm not to them yet. Water quality issues critical, arsenic, some of the other constituents that are affecting water quality for the county. We at the Water Research Institute have a lot of interaction with some of the approaches to provide alternative water supplies, which I'll mention. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about this. I'm done with my overview, part one. It's just like, as we're sort of talking about some of the things that seem really obvious, like population growth, let's remember that there's these huge issues that are just taking a lot of water out of the system, and keep those in mind as we're planning for the future. So do you have any questions or comments before I go through the second part?
I have questions.
Yeah, please.
Would you also maybe cover what have you done in the way of promoting, encouraging, say, drip irrigation to reduce evaporation and to have a more effective transpiration? Also, what steps have been taken to recover what little runoff there is, to recover that runoff and not have property damage to the neighbors or so?
Perfect. So I will address both of your questions in detail. So now, can I just use okay, now I'm going to go to the slides if it's convenient. Can everybody see the slides? Okay. So, because there are some handouts. If anybody can't see the slides, we have some handouts. Thanks, Janine, for those. So this first slide, just to make sure people understand, it's pretty cool because the New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute was a model for the nation. This topic is leading the way because back in the 1950s, there was drought in New Mexico that was addressed with a meeting of academics, agencies, stakeholders that led to the first annual New Mexico Water Conference in 1956. And some subsequent discussions led to development and establishment of the Water Resources Research Institute at New Mexico State University campus. And the cool thing is, Senator Clinton P. Anderson, he had been Secretary of Agriculture before he became Senator of New Mexico. And he liked this idea. He took the idea to the national stage and in 1964 introduced and was passed the Water Resources Research Act that set up institutes in all 50 states, 3 territories in the District of Columbia, which is pretty cool because it was based on the New Mexico model, and it's just so exciting. And the cool thing is it was actually invoked in state statute now, so we have a mission to provide, much along the lines of the land-grant university that Senator Anderson was familiar with as Secretary of Ag. We do extension, we do research, we do outreach, technical communication. Those are parts of our mission. So here's an outline. I already did number 1. Going on to number 2, water budgets. So how do we actually look at water budgets in an effective way to assist with water resource decisions? And this is what I mean by a water budget. So here's an example. The blue areas are incoming, the orange areas are outgoing, and the rectangles are storage. So we can look at this is just like a budget. How much do we have coming in? How much is in our account? How much is going out? And we have a model we've put together called the New Mexico Dynamic Statewide Water Budget that tabulates 30 million data points in a way that you can easily access the current or the historic and some scenarios for the future of water budgets. And this picture actually just shows there's surface water and coming in, and precipitation coming into the system. There's evapotranspiration and surface water going out of the system. And there's storage on the land surface, in surface water, in human systems, and groundwater. And we have this model set up to look at different scales, and I wanted to highlight Lower Rio Grande because look at the boundary, that matches Doña County. So this is really, the great thing is, I don't know where this would go, but I would offer there might be a way to have more collaboration with the county and our institute because we're already doing so much work that's set up specifically for the Lower Rio Grande planning region. And even the Office of the State Engineer is looking at redrawing the planning regions, but I'm not sure that we should change this one because it's so kind of effective to have that correspondence between the county and the planning region. A few things you can learn from our model that are relevant here. If you compare different parts of the state of New Mexico, the nature of the aquifer you're looking at can be very important. And this just compares Lee County, which is in southeast New Mexico, with Socorro, which has a lot of similarities with Lower Rio Grande. And if you just have a fossil aquifer that's not being recharged, that's the blue line, and it just goes down over time. This is aquifer storage. But if you have a aquifer that's connected to a river, that's the orange line, it gets recharged and it doesn't get depleted as permanently. This actually changes over as you go from north to south, but I'm going to skip that. This is what I mentioned before. This is an important, this is an output of our statewide water budget for the Lower Rio Grande region, which, like I've mentioned, matches Doña County. And if you look over time from 1970s until 2020, we haven't updated it yet because we're waiting for the state engineer's 2023 report. But that surface water has been going down a lot since the 70s. That's the blue line that's going down. And look at the orange line, that's going up. So basically, we are offsetting our surface water shortfalls with increased groundwater extraction. And there's some other things that are part of that trend, the way the law is applied, but this is a very important backdrop for our groundwater situation. So this next part, I'm already on to alternative water supply. What can we do? One thing we can do is look for other ways to other water supplies. One option is treating brackish groundwater, and there's a lot of work going on with the state to look at brackish means salty groundwater desalination by Santa Teresa, and I could tell you more about what I know about that if you'd like. It's a nice option. I wanted to mention, I was just interviewed yesterday for El Paso Water Utilities. They had a statement from Mr. Ballou, their director, who, with the idea that El Paso will be largely independent of reliance on Rio Grande water in the coming years, just because they've got a system set up with desalination and recycling and reuse. So I think probably for the county, one of the most important lessons for alternative water supplies is that when we have high value outputs like urban, residential, municipal, industrial, we have the technology to treat a water supply to meet those needs. So nobody's gonna die of thirst in a city around here. We're gonna be able to find enough water to feed our population high values. But like Mel had emailed me, the agricultural use is a big question because that uses a lot of water. So I'm actually gonna skip this because I already talked about that. But I wanted to mention one of our approaches to looking at the system is try to look at the whole system. And I think this is where we might be able to work with the county. I don't know. It's very important to look at the entire portfolio. And we have a model that is tied into that statewide water budget, but it's a system dynamics model. So you not only look at the hydrology, which I already described, but also the other impacts like social and economic effects of agricultural production. And we set up a model that includes these different features, and it shows the interconnections, and it's called system dynamics. And we determined some really interesting outcomes. For example, if you do a fallowing program, the state of New Mexico right now is paying for about 3,000 acres to be fallowed, on the order of like $800 an acre. And thanks a lot. And that's a lot of money. And it also saves a lot of water, because when you fallow land, that means you don't plant your crop, you don't irrigate it, and you actually save water. So there's a lot of, I'll talk about a few efficiencies and things and get to your question about drip irrigation, but if you fallow, you save water, but then there's all these other problems, like you don't make the income from your crop. You may have weeds and dust and problems with unirrigated land. Even you can lose your processing facilities, like for onions or chilies, if you fallow them too much, and then when you want to bring it back, you have nowhere to sell your crop. So there's a lot of implications of fallowing that go beyond just saving that water. So we looked at it, and it turns out that you can actually save more water per amount of economic cost if you fallow alfalfa fields. So there's a lot of reason to look beyond just the hydrology and look at the whole system. And here's a question for you. Why did I not include pecans in this analysis of fallowing?
Why?
Question, why not?
You can't fallow it.
You can't fallow pecans. So this is actually a very important point. We have a locked-in water need because you can't just let pecans go dead for a year. You need to keep them watered. You can look at this systems approach, and actually, if we want to recharge our aquifers, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail there, but there's a model behind it that shows if you help the farmers, like the state program for fallowing or with other incentives, you can increase the groundwater recharge by looking at the whole system and understanding the economic implications of fallowing. And I will talk a little bit more about recharge. But I wanted to get to your question about, Commissioner Fisher, about you are all commissioners, right? I wanted to make sure that you understood that there's a lot of ways to look at drip irrigation. And we've done a lot of studies at New Mexico State University, and you can really increase the efficiency of your irrigation by using drip, where you apply the water to each plant, or more specifically to the root zone instead of flooding. But there's a drawback, which is when you flood irrigate, I mean, what they do is they build a little berm, you probably know this, but they put a berm around the field and then just flood it so that there's standing water. On average, 46% of that water is going to soak back into the ground and go back to recharge the aquifer. So this is a very important function of flood irrigation. That's not wasting any water. That's actually recharging our storage for the future. So when we think about drip irrigation, it's important to understand that trade-off. So what we've done is some studies where we look at the drip versus flood irrigation and include the yield. And we're actually trying to figure out ways to package a dual irrigation strategy where if you have surface water coming from the Rio Grande using your ditch irrigation infrastructure, that's a perfect time to flood irrigate, because you take that surface water, you put it out on the landscape, you irrigate your crop, and you get that recharge of the aquifer. But then when it's time to pump groundwater, right now what happens is a lot of the farmers use their surface irrigation system and just pump groundwater into the ditches and canals. But then what happens? Some of that water just soaks back into the ground, right? So now you're using a lot of extra energy, you have emissions, you have costs to pump water that then just soaks back to the aquifer, and you actually increase the salinity of the aquifer by leaching salts out of the soil. So I guess I'm not sure I answered your question, but for one thing, drip irrigation is efficient. But for two, you want to do it in the context of the bigger picture.
But you get 8% goes to evaporation. I mean, and as you have on your charts, even when you drip irrigate, the wet soil recharges. So have you done a comparison on that, on the drip irrigation, taking into consideration the less evaporation and also the surface water?
We have, for sure. And I don't know, so, for example, drip irrigation, we got 4% recharge. So it's very low, almost negligible. So you're not recharging your aquifer anymore when you drip.
But you're not losing 8%. So.
But you're not losing, right. So you're getting more efficient irrigation. So it's probably, so NMSU in some of the College of Agriculture, Consumer Environmental Sciences programs, and some of the other engineering programs are looking at different ways of being more efficient with irrigation. And one of the problems right now is sort of the long term. Like for pecans, it's hard if you have an existing orchard to put in drip. For some crops like onions, the existing drip technology, a lot of times you have to pull out your drip lines after you irrigate, after you harvest. So it's very inefficient. So that's kind of more in like irrigation technology approach that NMSU is working on, being more and more like cost-effective drip irrigation, and it's probably going to just increase in this area, I would say.
But although it is a cost factor, you have to take into consideration that surface water irrigation out of the Rio Grande brings a lot of seeds, a lot of weeds, and then you've got a lot of spraying that has chemicals.
That's
so
right.
It's an overall balance you have to
Exactly.
look at.
Yeah, and also the great thing about reducing like you said, if you can time that so you're not getting a lot of recharge back to the aquifer when there's agrochemical use, that can avoid getting constituents in the groundwater that you don't want to be there. I really like your perspective, and I think that's important. And we're trying to. So I guess for drip irrigation, it's important to. We actually have something called life cycle analysis, which it's not published yet, but we're trying to look at all those factors together, and it's essentially showing that if you can. Flood irrigation is extremely efficient. So if you can use it where possible, it's good for the overall system. But then, like you said, for
I agree. I mean, I'm not an advocate to going against flood irrigation because the roots do need to have a cleansing in our environment. But a groundwater drip system combination needs to be focused on.
yeah, exactly. So we're continuing to work on that. The other thing is crops. You can put in other crops like pistachios are from the arid Middle East where there's drought many times. So you can actually make just as much money per acre with pistachios as you can with pecans, but you can have a time when they're actually dry or you're deficit irrigating them and they still do fine. So we're looking into other crops that can be more adaptable for our region and make just as much money for the farmers. We're looking into technologies. So a lot of technologies are average everything over big landscapes, and we have satellites now that can show variation in evaporation on a very small scale. And this is one of our research scientists at the Water Research Institute, Bob Saby, who's figured out a way to figure out the evapotranspiration using some of the new satellite products. And now I'm going to get to your next question about the flooding and the watershed runoff. So I'm just going to skip to the middle one here. We have something called the Strategic Community Water Management Program that's funded by the state legislature. And Raimundo Lara, you may know him, he's a legislator from south of here. And he's got a project in La Union that he's funded our institute to work with the county. I mentioned John Gwynn before, but they've had some real flooding issues, and we're doing a few things about it. Number one, we're adding some instrumentation to what the county's already done so that, I'll just go to this next one quickly. People can, the idea, this is an example from northern New Mexico, but people can just look on their phone and see what's happening with their water system. In this case, it's for irrigating acequias. But we're setting this up for La Union so that the local community members will have access to some instrumentation that shows runoff from the watershed, and they can actually just look at their phone and see and be assured that they're not unaware of any flooding. That's what the little graph on the bottom is. That's what you can see on your phone. And the other great thing is we have this actual funding for a person who works at the Water Institute to be able to interact with community members and make sure we're delivering what information they need about their watershed. So that's just the data part. Now, what are we going to do about reducing the flooding? Well, we have a whole program for watershed restoration. Of course, we're a research institute, so we're not just an engineering firm to go out and do projects, but we're trying to figure out ways to start at the top of the watershed. And this is where I'm going to go into I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and look at basically going to small little channels. Like if you go up into any watershed, it starts out where there's just flat hill slopes, and then you start getting little channels, and then you get bigger and bigger arroyos. Well, if you go out and put stones on the small hill slope areas to reduce flow and hold it on the hill slope, if you put small dams and lines of stones in the small channels, you can actually reduce runoff from your entire watershed by holding it up on the watershed. So this is what we're going to be doing in La Union to not only monitor the flow, but also hold it on the watershed. And we're testing all these, we have all these instruments to test the effect of this watershed restoration, and we'll actually not only keep the water up on the watershed, but increase recharge to the aquifer, because instead of running off quickly and flowing down to Texas, it's going to actually soak into the watershed and be in our aquifer.
Dr. Vermont, if I was to do a tabletop demonstration with water, okay? And I had a big flask of water here representing our water aquifer, right?
Yeah.
Surface runoff water or snowpack, like you described it, right? And from this big flask to all the users down the line, all the way down to Texas, right? If for some reason I don't have enough snowpack and we have more use of water without conservation or having alternative uses of water, including flood irrigation, drip irrigation, whatever, right? So on this tabletop demonstration, if for some reason we don't have enough snowpack, that means that the consumption of water is greater than the aquifer can actually sustain. So sustainable, there would be not, in other words, enough water to sustain growth for everybody in the county. Am I correct?
So what you're describing,
I mean, this is kind of a very simple tabletop demonstration, but I mean, that's the way I interpret it.
so right now the Mesilla aquifer has not reached that condition where it's continually depleted. We have years where the recharge actually, the storage goes back up. But we are seeing a trend where since 2002, when we started getting more drought conditions, it's like you said, overall, we're getting lower water tables. Like you know, Byrne Lake went dry in 2011. And that was basically the water table going down below the bed of Byrne Lake. So we are seeing the aquifers going down some, but it's not just all a continual decline. It also goes back up in wetter years. So the key for the long term is looking at ways to do things like this, like get recharge back into the aquifer when we have a chance, when we have surface water, when we have a wet year, and then use it as a checking account and use groundwater in dry years. I mean, that's the ideal.
And I could be wrong, but I just see this as, you know, surface runoff water for agriculture. Okay, basically we're addressing that. But when you say that you have 40% rechargeable and the other 60% evaporation and other elements that come into play, right? We haven't even introduced the influx of people coming into the area. And as dramatic conditions happen throughout the United States, a lot of people are looking for this area.
Yeah.
So how do we address that issue? I mean, are we looking at alternative desalination of water, or I don't even know what the water packs between states. If we wanted to bring water from the ocean, right? Is that a possibility, or what's your opinion on that?
I think we need to do everything. I think we need to do these small programs where we're, and I don't know, maybe we don't really need the slides anymore. I guess maybe you could, what's that? How do I just turn that off? Because at this point, I don't really need it. I mean, I got through most of the slides. Is there a way to just turn the, okay. Anyway, because of what I described to you about the evaporative demand, and we're looking at a 30% increase in evaporative demand over 80 years. We've done a lot of work to see what does it take to meet all our existing needs with 30% less water. Like, it's kind of a experimental approach. And if we look at the overall water budget, City of Las Cruces uses about 20,000 acre feet. And the agricultural water withdrawals, even though it's not all consumed because of that recharge of the aquifer, about 350,000 acre feet, for example. So you can actually meet, and another thing that I meant to mention, I was thinking of this in the middle of the night. I'm glad you asked. There are some other communities, for example, El Paso, I already mentioned, they're getting less and less reliant on Rio Grande water. If you look at Santa Fe, they have growth by increasing efficiency, increasing conservation, but also by increasing reuse and by even increasing treatment of, they're talking about treating brackish groundwater as well, though they're not doing that yet. So I think one question is meeting the needs of the urban population, and one is the bigger water budget for the county. And I think to meet the needs of the, like you're saying, people are moving here, we have increasing population. Maybe a thing to do would be to get these other municipalities that have such effective, I mean, it's kind of a city question, but because of there's so many people in the county, it's a county question. These strategies that allow for growth without increasing water use for the residents. I think that's a different question. Like if you look at Middle Rio Grande, they have a lot of water use by agriculture, but also by their bosque. Like a quarter of their water use is by their riverside forest. So they're looking at their city going, we have basically flat water use even though we're growing our population. And meanwhile, our bosque is using a quarter of our water. So I'm not really answering your question very well, but I think number one, we need to look at all the pieces: desal, efficiency, recharge, conservation, treatment. But we also need to look at it in the context of the whole water budget, not just the amount that the urban population uses.
So are your teams broken up in that way? A team that focuses on the residents, a team that focuses on the agricultural, and then the overall natural?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to think. So at New Mexico State University, that's true. There's 200 different faculty members who work at some aspect of water. Some of them aren't applied. It's like physics, looking at new forms of ice. But a lot of them are applied. And in health, we have a researcher, Humaira, who's looking at arsenic in the county. In engineering, we have a lot of the treatment. In our Water Research Institute, we have a lot of the kind of broader integrated system approaches and supporting all those different units. In agriculture, there's more of the work on efficiency and crops. So I guess at the university level, yes, we're broken up.
And
that
do
way.
you have a team that focuses on cooperation between federal government and state on these water issues? For example, water reservoirs that are located on federal property but impact the residences down below and the farming down below?
So just yesterday, we had a meeting, the first meeting of this Urban Waters Partnership that's led by the Environmental Protection Agency, and that is there. So we are just now participating in an effort to do that, to have it's kind of, they call it an ambassador and a liaison between the local groups and the federal funding, basically, because there's a lot of federal programs, like Bureau of Reclamation has a lot of programs for regional water issues. We have, we work with the Stormwater Coalition, we work with the county and the city and the federal agencies. So our institute does a lot of that, but we don't really have we don't have it set up yet the way you said, where there's like a specific group that has that. But we are just, I mean, just yesterday we started working on that.
You know, I think should be a requirement, because you've put together a program, where people can report issues and problems, but what happens is you report an issue and the buck just gets passed on, and it ends up being an entity that nobody has any control over, and so nothing gets done. It's very frustrating.
Jot that down.
Mr. Chair, I have a question also. Doctor, so I just had a question. So do you also have like a coordinator or representative that talks directly with EBID and the state engineer's office on the reports that you get from, aquifer levels and so forth? Some type of report that you guys give them, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the way that works now is there's kind of two aspects to it. One is the planning. So the Interstate Stream Commission, which is part of the Office of the State Engineer, has a water planning group. So we interact with them. We're actually trying to provide input. There's going to be another round of regional water planning that comes up next year, probably after June next year. And that Office, the Interstate Stream Commission, is in charge of that. So our Water Institute is working with the Interstate Stream Commission in particular to help with this lower Rio Grande region because we're here, but also with some of the other regions around the state. So that involves kind of all, the idea there, we're hoping to actually help bring together the major water users of the region. This was done before by our Water Research Institute, and look at the water resources in a kind of very detailed accounting. We did that in 2004 and had a great effort with a lot of people involved. And the state did another planning round, I think back in 2017, that they did themselves more or less. But we're trying to advocate for the local water users. That's like the county, the city, the different crop groups, the irrigation district, to be involved in that planning process. So that's one of them. So
Sure. Yeah, and so as far as the La Union watershed district, I actually helped create that.
Oh,
with the
great.
help of a local government, yeah. So
That's really cool.
I applaud you for doing that. How and when will the local residents be able to get that information that you were checking on the app
Yeah.
and all that? Yeah.
So it's a 2-year project, so we're hoping by like May 30th next year, that's when our funding runs out on it. So within the next year.
Within the next year? Okay. Thank you, sir.
And you had also asked about OSC. So we do coordinate just more on the reports and things with OSC. And we're we have a project that we're just starting with that's supporting Elephant Butte Irrigation District. It's actually funded by Reclamation, but it's to try and look at projects around the Mesilla Valley that will improve. Our part of it is to look at riparian habitat and aquifer recharge, but Elephant Butte Irrigation District has a lot of projects planned to improve water management in the region. So we do work with them, and just more like on a project basis. Same thing with the state engineer.
Understood. Thank you. We appreciate your feedback today, and we definitely hope that you would consider some of our advice, like Ms. Teresa Fisher was mentioning, and thank you very much.
And, we haven't even addressed large animals like dairies coming into the area, some of which are leaving, but I'm sure that they consume quite a bit of water. That's a heavy use industry for water. Um, I'm not too totally convinced. On this tabletop demonstration, that we will have enough water for the next 25 or 50 years, simply on the fact that we have climate change, hot days. And my question is, how do we recharge that water aquifer when we don't have enough snowpack? I mean, only 40% of what we use goes back into, when farming goes back into the, for recharge, right? Evaporation rates. Maybe an alternative for other crops in the area that would be, instead of a 60 or a 90-day crop, as an alternative. When you see flood irrigation, I wish we could have had more information, I mean, from Elephant Butte Irrigation District regarding the total acreage that's being farmed on a variety of different crops. Stacking of water rights between farmers, and I'm sure that the sale of land from one farmer goes to another farmer, it hardly ever goes into a subdivision or whatever. But what I'm saying here is this: in the event that the water aquifer doesn't have enough water to supply pecans or alfalfa or grapes, whatever, right, as a field crop, what happens to the rest of us? We certainly don't want to run like we did in Magdalena, New Mexico. All of a sudden, you turn the water faucet on, and guess what? No water. And what do they have to do? They have to truck water in, right? We don't want to get there. We certainly don't want to get there. And we need to address these issues so you know where we're coming from for planning and zoning. Important. Cluster development. Development of how we're going to be able to plan, not just for right now, but for the future, right? And your presentation is really remarkable. And we do appreciate that. Do you have any questions?
Does the aquifer under the Tularosa Basin provide any relief in terms, I mean, it's supposed to be a huge amount of water that's highly saline.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if that was a possible source of water, and did we learn anything from the pilot project in Alamogordo?
So there's a facility in Alamogordo that is the Brackus Groundwater National Desalination Research Facility. It's operated by Reclamation. And I think what we're learning is if you have the money, you can pretty much treat any water for whatever use you have in mind. I mean, they've tested a lot of different technologies, reverse osmosis, membrane, heat distillation, all these different technologies. And I think that's my conclusion. So, and this is partly why I've stated that I think we'll be able to find water for the residential population for long into the future, just because of the ability to treat lower quality water. Your point about aquifer, so I think that's my lesson from there, but of course be highly costly. And actually, the K. Bailey Hutchison desal plant in El Paso, they essentially are using water that's flowing south very slowly from the Tularosa Basin into Texas. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, for the long-term future, people do talk about trying to treat the salty water in other regions. I don't know if it's like we have in our own aquifer we have a lot of, there might not be a need to go over to Tularosa just because there's a lot of brackish water in this region.
Okay.
I mean,
Dr. Fernal, I applaud your team's efforts on the work with crops that use less water. Is there anything that, for example, on this pistachio, and as you state, similar economic returns as pecan, less water use, is there anything that can be done with incentives to promote more of these lower water crops being planted instead of the high water demanding crops?
I'm kind of thinking of other states where these have happened, like Las Vegas, Nevada, for example. They have, not only do they have a lot of policies within their municipality, but they also have policies in their state and the surrounding counties for agricultural water use. So given the right kind of regulatory environment, they've been able to reduce like the irrigation season for parts of the surrounding counties with some incentives so that it maintains the water rate structure, the rights, I mean, but also allows the city to not have, basically, they have to get some extra water into their city. So yes, those are possible.
So the university really can't, you say, change that mental thought to put in more pecans. I mean, where does that have to come from to encourage our farmers to put in these less water-consuming products or crops? In your opinion?
So this is great. I'm kind of thinking back to your question about, well, my answer to your question about the planning process and your question about the long-term aquifer. I really think that this is where we need a kind of community effort to envision a future that meets all those needs, and then see what's required. Because there's, I think there's technology, crops, things like that you don't even need incentives. You can make just as much money. All you need is maybe some capital investment to change your system. But maybe it's worth it for the state to have some incentive program. I mean, fallowing program they're doing is basically an incentive program because state funding is being used to pay to fallow lands and save water in this region. So I think that might be what I would take away today is try and have a better answer in a year when they start having this regional water planning process to be able to really say, you know, what would it take to figure out that scenario?
I have another question on the desalination side. Are we doing anything in desalination in Doña Ana County?
Yeah. Well, so at this point, New Mexico State University, our Water Institute, the College of Engineering, we did a pilot study of a desal plant in Santa Teresa, and now the state has picked up a lot of that. With the Office of the State Engineer, they're running some aerial surveys of groundwater in the region, looking at continuing to work with engineering to look at some pilot plants and even look at how to install or where and what would be the engineering design for a desal plant right on the border there, or maybe on the order like about half of the size of what, or a third the size of what El Paso has, maybe 10 million gallons a day. So that is probably the biggest effort I know of right now. Okay. Kind of spawned by the business Board Industrial Park and some of the governor's interest in promoting that region.
Thank you.
So Sam, is water consumption per capita in Las Cruces lower than it was 10 years ago, or is it about the same?
It's going down.
And is it close to what El Paso is? Because I know El Paso was considered pretty efficient in water conservation.
I'm not the expert on that. I just get occasional reports on that, so I don't know. But, I mean, one thing that is for sure is that the growth in the population is a lot faster than the water use, and the water use per capita is going down. So those are kind of, it's not just that if you have a growing population that your water use is also growing with it. Just with conservation, efficiency, all those things. So I could get you that answer, but I don't want to give the
Okay.
wrong answer.
Sorry. Thank you.
I have another quick question. So do you have somebody in your group that actually advocates or works with local governments about, bringing more water treatment plants to the area or so forth? I know the region of Santa Teresa has been growing a lot, and we're a little concerned because there's just so many homes and apartment buildings going up, which demand, lots of water. And I know that since being a resident of Santa Teresa, there have been instances where one of the wells at Crew has gone down, and they've asked us to reduce water use and not water lawns for a period of time. So it's a little scary, knowing that all those developments are going up and there's not any way to back up in case there was something that went wrong with the systems.
Yeah, that is the tough question. It has a lot of pieces to it. I mean, we're from the Water Research Institute and the university, we're trying to inform the process of like what would a desal plant look like right there. We tried actually, we're still trying to figure out ways to work with the county. We had a great project set up for looking at arsenic, but the Environmental Protection Agency disallowed us from applying for that one because we already had a university unit working in a similar program. So we are trying to work on that area. It's critical. I think even the dean of the engineering has identified this water, this need to meet our agricultural needs with less water as a key priority. Same thing with engineering has identified this need for better water treatment in this region as a high priority. So we have people working on pieces of it, but we don't really have I think you asked if we have a person dedicated to that. We don't really
Sure,
have that.
yeah, somebody that would be advocating for the residents and the people that do the agriculture and all that, saying, well, we're using so much water and our aquifers are going down. What are our options to bring more water to the table?
Yep.
Mhm.
I mean, I would say it might be good if you could recommend a contact from your group and we could work with them as part of this regional water planning process and address a lot of the questions you're asking, and then have some, at least if not answers, at least some scenarios to think about a year or more from now. That might be a way to get some better answers to your questions.
Thank you, sir.
It's a very complicated subject. Well, for myself, the variables of water usage, I think, should be broken down by category, like residential water use, irrigated agricultural water use, livestock water use, commercial use, industrial and mining use, and power use. I mean, that way we have a better idea as to how we're gonna be able to accommodate everybody's needs for water. And then you go into water conservation and the different methods of accomplishing that. It just appears that, that we need to have a better idea as to address agricultural use first and how we're gonna be able to accommodate all the water, all the crops that are being raised, okay? The next one would be is, how much foul land is there going to be once you have transfer of water from one farmer to another, or,
Or from the farmers to the city.
yes.
Yeah.
So what happens to planning and zoning for foul land? What are we gonna do with that? It's all one big picture. And it's not simple. But as we go, I think that we need to make sure that we don't have a glitch down the line that says, okay, we won't be able to, you only be able to shower once a week. We don't want to get there. That's why we're trying to see if we can plan ahead, okay? And I'd like to continue this for a very long time, because this is very, very interesting. And I hope that maybe people in the city are listening to this conversation we're having now. And so we can all get together as one to accommodate everybody.
Yeah.
Not just one specific agriculture or whatever, right? But there's a lot of issues, and I haven't had time to research, but is there such a rule that says if you don't use it, you lose it on stacking water rights? Is that correct? Is that a law that says that, or?
Yeah, use it or lose it. It's 5 years without use. The state engineer could, he could forfeit water rights. It's not implemented very often. But usually it's more like what used to be a farm turns into a shopping center, and 20 years later, the state engineer, and they didn't go through all the paperwork to change the water rights, so there's like a water right for a shopping center. That's usually the kind of case where they would lose it. The state engineer doesn't like actively go out and seek to commandeer people's water rights, but there is that, it's actually a disincentive for conservation. I was asked this the other day by a group of university administrators, and some states have actually adjusted their law so that it maintains their water loss system, but it allows for conservation without the threat of losing your water right. So that is something that other states have done. And it is a hindrance to long-term conservation programs. Like the fallowing, you have to make sure that you don't fallow your land for 5 years and somehow become subject to some of these constraints on use it or lose it. So that's a very important issue.
As an example, you take New Mexico State University,
Yeah.
all the grass they have there, all that, on and on and on. You go by in the middle of the day and they're watering grass, right? Where in my house, I'm allowed to have artificial turf and desert plants, and I don't mind that, okay? But when you look at these issues, you say, wait a minute, what's going on here? And I go to Walmart or whatever, and they ask me, hey, what are you going to do about that? I said, I'm chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I can address these issues to staff, and then staff will forward that to the Board of County Commissioners, and then we'll proceed forward to see if we can have continuous discussions on this as work sessions.
Yeah.
And I invite anybody here in the audience, if you have any questions of Dr. Fernald, please step forward. I mean, this is what we're here for. We're all in one to find out answers. And if we don't have answers, we'll get them as we go along, okay? So if you have any questions of Dr. Fernald, please step forward and ask him. State your name, and hopefully you might be able to get the right answer. If not now, maybe down the line, okay? don't be shy. I guess no questions, no answers, right?
I think your idea of continuing to work on this, if there's a way that you'd like us to, our Water Institute, to continue to interact with your commission, I think that's a good idea.
Any questions or Dr. Fernald?
I'd just like to make sure we get your contact information, either from you or from our representatives, so we're able to send emails or contact, everything's there? Okay,
You can contact me
perfect.
that. And,
It's on the, okay. We appreciate you being out here, your time and effort for your presentation, everything that you did. Try to definitely give us an idea of what's going on, and we as the commission will work together and put together any further questions that we may have for you and your organization. Thank you.
I look forward to that.
And from my end, the results of the research that you have brought forth are serious steps. If serious steps are not taken in conserving water and curtailing the excess withdrawal of the aquifer, will continue to deplete and could eventually dry up. It's the way I see it, and that's why I mentioned Magdalena. So we appreciate your presentation, and we would like to invite you to come back again and bring other, come step forward. Yeah. Just state your name for the record. Yeah.
Joshua Rich, and I have a business here in Las Cruces or Doña County. And the lose it or use it water rights, and I've been here since 2019 with agricultural operations, and it is a mindset that you have to use the water. So whether they're just dumping it into a ditch, and I've heard of different farmers, doing this, and literally just creating a lawn opposed to, let's say, artificial turf or things that are more water, conservation efforts that you could do. It's counterintuitive, that law, because it doesn't give you the incentive to try to conserve water, because you're going to have something taken away from you. So I think that's the root of a lot of this is, how do you conserve water when you're having people literally dump water in a ditch so they don't lose their water rights? Yep. And I mean, farmer after farmer, all the way from the alfalfa guys and the corn guys to everyone I know, from Roswell, to Deming to, it's the same story. So I think that's kind of the root of it. And I've always it's baffled me a little bit that people would, just have to use the water in an arbitrary way simply to keep it right. So I think that disincentivizes the folks with the water rights. And it also discourages conservation.
Well, we have to address this issue with our state legislators.
Yep.
We need to address the critical issue, and I'm sure they're probably working on it, because the governor did propose a 50-year plan for water. It's kind of mind-boggling that we have these antiquated rules that we need to address as we go. I don't have a real answer, but we'll start with our representatives that we have in our state legislature and see if we can address these issues. And thank you very much for your comment. Come on, step forward. Just state your name for the record, please.
Patrick Vandergriffen. I need to kind of back him up on this, so I'll tell you a New Mexico story that goes with it. Some years back, the late Colin McMillan, and probably most of you knew him, owned the property out there at Three Rivers between Carrizosa and Alamogordo. And he was in a position where they were looking at taking his water rights unless he proved them and used them. So literally he watered the desert with billions of gallons of water sprayed through sprinklers with no value or gain or benefit from it whatsoever. And so perhaps the idea of taking water rights is the mistake, and providing some method for emphasizing and rewarding conservation is the true answer. So when you're talking to legislatures, give them that thought process, I think.
Well, you know, for a fact, you have the Bolins Farm up in Acela Flats. They should be rewarded for their irrigation system. It's drip irrigation. And I think that a farmer should be, I agree with you, should be rewarded somehow financially to install drip irrigation or an alternative way of irrigating their crops. That way would accommodate many other crops that come to the area, including greenhouses. Who knows?
Yeah, I remember telling a city manager years ago that everybody at the end of the year went into this absolute use it or lose it budget situation, would spend money like crazy. They might have forms that were printed out 12 years in advance. And I went to him and I said, I need these things in my office and you really can't afford to budget them. But I said, if I don't spend it, let me keep half of it and carry it over into the next year's budget. He was in absolute shock. And I said, if you do that in 3 years, then I can buy this new computer system that the department desperately needs. And he agreed immediately. And then I had everybody pissed off at me because I was getting stuff they weren't getting. So there's just different ways to skin that cat.
Right.
Well, there should be ways to bank those water rights and let somebody else that actually does need them use them.
Exactly.
And it profits the person who's conserving.
Well, I mean, it's marketing water. If you can bank the water rights, you should be able to sell them, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to.
I don't know.
If you want somebody to do something, give them money to do it.
Right.
And if you don't want them to do it, tax them. That's what it comes down to.
Well, we have a former legislator here in the audience, and but anyway, it's going to get kind of complicated. But we can't solve it all here. But we have a beginning to start having solutions and introduce new ideas. I mean, I'm just trying to get the ball rolling, and thanks to Dr. Vernal that he took time to explain a lot of things to us, and I hope that people out there that are empowered, they're listening to this conversation that we're having here, and they can come back and talk to staff, the director, and maybe we can get additional work sessions going. Invite everybody. One thing that I think that we should do is have a representative from Elephant Butte Irrigation District to give us the total acreage that's being farmed, irrigation, and the total acreage. And we might be able to get those records from the county, how much fallow land we have under Ag 1 status. And what happened to those water rights? How do they transfer? And the next question would be is, what is the legal limits of water transferring from one farm to another? Can we go from one end of the county to the other, or does it have to be concurrent to the adjacent properties? I don't know any about that. I just did a little bit of research on satellite technology on water aquifer from New Mexico State University, and I've been doing a little bit of research on that, but this is a very complicated issue. And I thank everybody for attending, okay? Well, I guess we're getting closer to the end, am I correct?
So we've got
Okay,
an amendment.
the amendments.
Chair, before we proceed, I'm just going to ask, does anybody need like a 5-minute break before we move forward?
Can I have the PowerPoint for the amendments? Okay. Okay, we have all. Okay, this is a summary of the amendments to the Unified Development Code.
No, I was just, you know,
I'm just going to go through the areas of the UDC that we've made changes to. The actual changes are in the agenda packet. We're changing the 350-104 administrative authority and duties. We're adding modifications to subdivision plats shall be submitted in conjunction with a preliminary plat. 350-201, general public hearings. We're adding, if an application is denied, the request cannot be applied for within 1 year from the date of the denial unless the new request is substantially different from the original request. This area right here in the DRC, we had one of the members ask about substantially different. And
Exactly.
yeah, because that could be interpreted so many different ways, and I will need to look into that too. I don't know how we could change it, but
and the question I have is, we ran this by legal, right?
no, not yet.
Okay.
Okay,
So why don't you just stop at denial? From the date of denial? Why don't you just stop there and say they can't apply again for a year, period?
yeah, we could do that.
Why kick the door back open?
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that, I guess, or check into it with our staff meeting. The next one is in 350-214, the expiration of land use applications. We're adding a building permit may be refused if there are violations of the property and they come in to compliance with all the codes and ordinances that we have. Table 5.1, the land classification matrix. We're eliminating all of the ag assessment because we're getting a lot of confusion with people coming in with, especially with cannabis, wanting to just do the cannabis there. So we're just taking all that out because the agriculture assessment is really how they tax the property, and it's not really of how we use the land use and how planning approaches land use. And we're eliminating condos in D2 and D2L because they're considered high density. And we're eliminating RV parks in D3 zone.
And Dr. Renaud, again, thank you very, very much for helping us out. And if you have any of your colleagues that would like to come forth, please ask them to talk to Janine, staff, and we're welcome you folks anytime you want to come. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Back on to the amendments?
Charlene, go back one, please.
Yes.
What's the purpose of this first one?
The ag assessment?
Yeah.
We had it in the matrix that had ag assessment, especially on different areas. We had A's on there across the matrix.
You mean from the assessor's office?
When the land is assessed as agricultural, they can farm on it. So when the cannabis came in, and it's a crop that they can put in. And so, and the initial ordinance, we had the cannabis that they could do it by right if they had ag assessment and they had the proper zoning. So we're taking all of that out so that they cannot do that. They have to come in for the special use permit for that, for the cannabis.
To grow cannabis?
To grow cannabis in the ground. And so there was a lot of confusion with the ag assessment.
Mr. Chair, if I can add, the changes to the permissible uses for cannabis have already been changed in a prior amendment. They can no longer do growing of cannabis in areas where they're already assessed for ag. What we're doing now is just cleaning up the rest of the matrix. When it was first adopted, when the UDC was adopted, for some reason they, in the permissible uses table, they allowed certain, agricultural uses if they were assessed as ag. which in my opinion is a conflict because the assessment can be changed, whereas land use and zoning should be something that's defined by ordinance. And so what we're doing now is just defining in which zoning districts you can do agricultural uses by right, and in which cases you need a special use permit. So we're just eliminating the ag assessment as a defining element for where you can do certain things.
And that's because we don't have an ag district in the zoning ordinance.
Right, we don't have an agricultural zone. We pretty much allow agricultural uses in all districts. And so what we're doing now is just determining, based on the density of those districts, whether or not you can do agriculture or if you need a special use permit.
So you're saying you can't have a home garden or something?
You could still have a home garden. You can basically do that. You can, like I said, you can do agriculture in every district, basically. But if you're going to do something more intense, like processing or a larger operation, you might need a special
commercial.
use permit. Yes.
Another question. On the D2 zones that we've had, from the ETZ, we inherited through UDC, a lot of D2 zones that we need to address very carefully up in Santa Teresa and up in that area, Sunland Park, for variances.
Okay.
And did you take that into consideration as well?
No, we're just eliminating the apartments and condos in a D2L zone because they're considered high density. The D2 is more of like a medium density zoning classification, so that's why we're eliminating the apartments and the condos.
Okay.
Okay, in the legend, we're mobile home food vendors by SUP in T2, T3, and T4 zones, eliminating mobile food vendors in all residential zones. So we're adding the mobile food vendors have to come in for an SUP in a T2, a T3, and a T4. This came up because we had like a little war in Berino with the food trucks. And we had people selling food from their home out of a food truck. They built a little, and they were doing that. And so we got complaints because there were people coming like at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night and long lines, and they had this menu on Facebook that you could look up. And so it became a war when we told them that they had to go to a commercial zone. So we're trying to eliminate that.
And to address this issue for the gallery, for the audience, okay? We are in charge of the safety and general welfare of the public. That's why we have these zonings, okay? So you can understand where we're dealing here. And so when you have this kind of a zone and you have mobile units next to a house, schools or whatever, you can understand what could happen there. So this is why we're trying to do this, okay? Go ahead.
Okay, and then we're adding new uses, campground and event centers. And we're expanding categories of existing uses by adding boarding and training and riding facilities to a commercial stable, adding RV and boat storage to mini storage unit category, and adding storage only to wrecking service, specifying no dismantling, because we've had cases with that kind of stuff too that's come up. And then on table 5.2, conditions for transit zones, for lodging, increasing numbers of rooms or RV parks from 12 to 15 in T4 zone, we had a cap on it for 40, and so we're thinking that it should be going up. So, this is coming from engineering. It's lots, driveway, and residential areas. 6.
Can you go back one previous page before that? Right here.
So what's the logic?
Well, we're deleting from the T, I don't know. What was the logic for that?
What's seating?
Mr. Chair, that we're not having a seating requirement at all for a food establishment. Currently in the T4 zone, if you want to operate a restaurant, we're capping the seating at 40 seats.
And what's the logic? I don't disagree with that, that's fine. But what's the logic of 12 to 15? I mean, it seems like an arbitrary number.
Well, that's to fit with our new proposal for the
Janine,
RV spaces.
we have the fire marshal here. He can probably give us a better explanation. Is that okay? Please step forward. Hold on a second. Because we're going to be asked questions about that. We don't have any answer, right? We're going to swear you in.
No, you don't have to.
No?
Policy.
All right, policy. All right.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, good morning. I'm sorry, what was your question?
My question is, what's the logic of increasing the number of rooms from 12 to 15? How did we come up with the number of 15?
So I'm not sure how the number 15 came about, but it's a table that we follow in the fire code as far as seating arrangements.
So wouldn't it be more logical to say follow the fire code?
Fire code or the International Building Code, yes, correct.
I mean, that seems like there's a logic behind it rather than just saying 12 to 15. Seems like you rolled the dice on this
It
one.
was kind of very arbitrary, you know?
Okay, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, the spaces from 12 to 15 in an RV park, I don't think that's something that's dictated by the building code. The building code might tell you if you need facilities based on the number of RVs that you have there, but it's not going to dictate how many you can have based on an area. For the seating arrangements or the allowable seating, yes, that would be in the building code, and we do already follow the building code, and it's mandated in a separate ordinance. So we would not need to put it in the zoning ordinance as well.
So if somebody came in and said they wanted to put in 20 rooms instead of 15, how do we defend the 15?
I mean, you're right. I don't know why how we came up with 15 in the T4, but based on the definition of the T4 and the density, we felt it was appropriate to have a cap for RVs in that area.
Christine, I'm not arguing that. I'm just asking if we have to defend that number. I mean, somebody walks up and says it's arbitrary and capricious, we're done, right? We need a logic for the number. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. And you know, that I couldn't answer because, to be honest, I don't recall having the conversation and how we came up with it.
I mean, why 12, right?
And that's the question. You know, I don't know. When it was originally written, I couldn't tell you why they came up with 12.
I think we take a harder look at that number, please, okay? And see if you can find a rationale. That's all I'm asking for.
And what is the seating requirements capped at 40? Where does that?
That's for food and drink establishment. We're capping the seats to 40 for alcohol and food establishments.
Eliminating it.
We're eliminating the cap, excuse me. We're eliminating the cap. There was a cap in there at 40, so we're eliminating that.
You're eliminating it.
Yes, so they can have more people there. Because we have wineries and beer things that are down south, and, you know, to cap it at 40
Okay.
wouldn't make sense. Okay, and this is another one, this is from engineering. They wanted, for reducing access requirements for all developments, changing approval from zoning administrator to county engineer, and eliminating the approval to one every 5 years. And then we're to the principal buildings and accessory, the setbacks. We're adding building separations, adding phrase, unless otherwise specified in this chapter, as there are specific separation distances for accessory buildings listed in the site standards table for the zoning districts. We're adding that in there.
So, wait, go back, Charlene. How are we reducing access requirements?
For, no, we're changed because it had zoning administrator on there for the lots and the driveways, and it's really a engineering question. So we changed the zoning administrator to put it to county engineer, that the county engineer is responsible for the reduction of access requirements for all development, changing approval, for the approval of the developments to be from the county engineer instead of the zoning administrator for just the lots and subdivisions and how it's developed. That the county engineer is responsible for that, not the zoning administrator.
Got it. And what does it mean eliminating the approval to one every 5 years? What does that mean?
That was from the,
Sorry. Mr. Chair, the section in the code that it refers to is, there's a couple of exceptions. We do have standard roadway widths and driveway widths. There are some exceptions that can be made depending on the circumstances, and that's where the approval is being transitioned to the county engineer. But it also states that if you have an approval, that you can't have another similar modification request approved for 5 years. And so we're eliminating that cap as well. So that if you come in and you do get a modification, it's approved by the county engineer for your roadway width, and within 5 years, you need to do another family split or something like that. You can still come back and have something like that approved, and you don't have to wait 5 years.
So you're just eliminating that?
Correct.
okay, and then for the principal building, of course, principal buildings, I already went through this. Then we're going to the general use standards and tables 5.4 and 5.5. Increased accessory dwelling size from 1,250 square feet to 3,000 square feet, or 10% of the lot area, whichever is less, in the T2, R5, R5L, D1, D1L, and T3. Because we're getting a lot of special use permits for accessory dwellings. And so we want to allow them, and they want bigger accessory dwellings. So we're increasing the size to 3,000 square feet. So we eliminate a lot of those special use permits when they come in. That's what this is for. It's reducing our workload. And then for we're clarifying in G2, this is for cannabis. This has been an issue that's been coming up for us all the time with cannabis. So we're adding the shortest distance line measurement is measured from the actual limits of the licensed premise of a proposed cannabis establishment. Cannabis is consumption area, cannabis courier, rather than the real property, and including from a residential area in this measurement. So we're going from eve to eve instead of property line to property line. So that's what this is addressing in the code.
I'm sorry, repeat that again. You're
Chair.
going from what?
Charlie, let me just, or for the record, advocacy is, let me just give a little bit of background on this section. I know the change looks small, but you know, there's a lot more to it. Last year, there was a change that happened at the Board of County Commissioners meeting. If you look at page in your packet, I think it's page 42. That way you guys can see the whole section there. But at the beginning of section G2, one of the major changes that happened last year at the BLCC level when we were dealing with the amendment number, I believe it was amendment number 4, right at the beginning, no cannabis establishment may be located within 300 feet of a residential area. They added the word residential area in there, where before it was just a school, K through 12, or daycare center. By adding the word residential area on there, and then further down saying, you know, the distance is going to be measured from the real property line of the now residential area, school or daycare center, and the actual limits of the real property of the proposed cannabis establishment. So the way that was worded, you're basically saying if somebody has a farm, let's just say a 20-acre farm out there, and they wanted to do cannabis right smack in the middle of it, but you just happen to be surrounded by your neighbor over here with 1 acre has a house, your neighbor on the other side has 3 acres and he's got a house. Well, you're basically next to residential areas, meaning that if we take this section right here, you're not allowed to operate a cannabis establishment, and there's no SUP option, there's no variance, there's no waiver request. You just can't do it. We've had several applicants come in, and they might have 20, 30, 15 acres out there, and if they have a neighbor, if they have a physical house, so somebody has a physical house out there next to them, then they can't do it. So we've been having a lot of issues with that. I mean, and this commission, in the past, you guys would hear, a cannabis production case, come in here once in a while, and I think the last one that happened was, a while back, and that's just because of this section right here. So thinking about, that change and what that caused, staff, we've just been trying to find, some kind of compromise, not a solution, not going back to how it was before, but some kind of solution that, where applicants can have, some wiggle room to apply for a cannabis establishment. The other thing to look at too is if you're already an established production facility or cannabis establishment, and let's just say, so right now you're basically grandfathered in if you are next to a residential area, so you can't expand. That's it. Whatever you've been approved for, whatever building permit you had approved by community development, that's it. If you have a residential area next to you, then you can't expand. You can't do anything else. It's just what's been approved previously. So, in a nutshell, the change that I'm proposing, and this has to do with large properties that might be able to handle a production facility or any other cannabis establishment adequately, is that we change the distance requirement. We still want to include residential areas, but the distance requirement is now going to be to the licensed premise. So if you have a big enough property where you're able to put your facility 300 feet away from a property line that's right next to a residential area, then you should be able to do it. That's basically what we're trying to propose, changing the distance requirement instead of being from property line to property line, from that property line to your licensed premises. And for example, if you're doing a building, then your building has to be 300 feet away from your property line. If you're doing an outdoor growing facility, then your fence has to be 300 feet away from that property line. You're still subject to the land use matrix. If you're in a T2 zone, you still have to get a special use permit, or it might be permitted by right, or you might not be able to do it if you're not on the on your if it's not allowed by the zoning district. But so there's still other requirements that people have to meet. But I think this is kind of a good compromise instead of just telling people flat out, no, you can't do it because your 30-acre farm has 2 houses right next to it.
Is there a requirement for fencing around where the cannabis is being grown?
Yes, the state mandates all those requirements. Okay. It's basically a 6-foot fence, security cameras, and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And we're for sure by staff that we're not violating any of the state statutes regarding the cannabis ordinance, right?
That's correct.
Right?
Well, it's actually less restrictive. That's your point.
Yes.
The proposal is less restrictive than the current.
Well, I mean, the state is basically telling us, county, you guys come up with the rules.
Yeah.
If somebody comes in, if somebody comes in and submits a request or a license from the Cannabis Control Division, now they're wanting either a business registration or a zoning verification letter from the local jurisdiction saying that they're okay to go. So they're passing on that requirement to us. It's like, hey, if the county allows it, then go ahead and submit your application to us.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, come on forward. Should we swear him in or not? No. Okay. State your name for the record, please.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Lutz.
Okay.
And I've been in the cannabis industry for about the last 4 years. And have been working with Albert, and he's been fantastic at getting this law changed. And I don't know if it's possible, but if you actually brought up a map of the Doña County zoning in the Rio Grande Valley, you'll see that almost 90% is T2, and it's all together. So basically, the current rules as they exist don't allow cannabis growing, production, retail locations in any of the Rio Grande Valley. So that's what we're trying to change. You know, we happen to be in a stance where we have 35-acre plot, right? And it's in the middle of farmland. Everybody around us is farmland. There's no residential areas. But there's a house 800 feet from a property line, which is another quarter mile from where the cannabis would actually be grown. But because of the current rule, we can't, because it's property line to property line. Okay. The other thing I would just like to mention, so I'm all for this change, and I think everybody in cannabis would be. The only thing I would change up there is it says measured from the actual limits of the licensed premises. Okay, well, as far as the state goes, the licensed premises is an address. It's not a building. It's not that little section of 1 acre you're going to grow cannabis on. If your address is 100 acres and that's your address, that 100 acres is the licensed premises. So I would just recommend that that language be changed. I don't know how to word it, maybe from the actual facility, actual production area, something like that. But if you leave it as licensed premises, the state would say, well, that whole, like with us, 35 acres, we're on Bosque Road, they would say that 35 acres is the licensed premises.
That's why I ask about the fencing.
Well, Chair, and just to touch base on that, for that same reason, we did come up with a definition of what licensed premises is. We do have, that was incorporated on the last amendment because we had similar issues. And so the definition for licensed premises, according to the UDC right now, it's the limits of the structure, enclosed area, or tenant space licensed for a cannabis retailer or cannabis consumption area. And I think on that one, we might have to make a modification to include just a cannabis establishment. Which cannabis establishment is basically, under that definition, is anything that has to do with cannabis, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's production, growing, so anything that would fall under that.
So do we have that in the definitions?
We do have that in the definitions right now.
Okay. Yeah, and the state does have, the regulation, the state is a 6-foot barrier fence, like if you're growing outdoors. It has to be 6 foot tall, you can't see through it.
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
Albert, Janine, this is not final, right?
No.
Ken, very interesting comment. Can this still be massaged before we do an adoption of these amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is our first meeting and our introduction to our proposal.
Make sure that you, before you leave, get a hold of Albert and discuss this at length, okay? All right, thank you. Go ahead.
So the next section, we're adding new sections to the UDC. So we're adding regulating mobile food vending businesses because of that issue. We're adding a section for campground and recreational vehicle parks and adding a section for recreational outdoor events. So we've had a lot of questions of that, like weddings or concerts and things like that. And this is for the DM zone, is primarily, and we're taking that they cannot live in an RV in a mobile home park. It has to be in an RV park that they can set their their RVs, not in a mobile home park. And so they can do an RV in a campground or an RV park. Because they're non-temporary, they're temporary, they're not permanent structures. That's the reasoning behind that. Okay. And then we're adding
Charlene,
terms, huh?
Go back.
Okay,
Take the word primarily out.
primarily, okay,
Why don't you just say is for mobile and manufactured homes?
okay.
Okay.
And then we're adding definitions in the glossary. We're adding we're changed the definition in accessory dwelling that they can rent the accessory structure, dwelling. That came up with the Jackson case that they couldn't rent it out because of the definition, so we're changing it here so that they can do that. Sorry. Then we're added.
Back up for a minute. Wait, I got a question for you.
Accessory dwellings.
Oh, okay.
So agricultural processing facility, on-site farm operations only. What if I'm a grape grower and I send grapes to a processing facility? So I'm not processing my own grapes, I'm having somebody else do it. Is that considered on-site? Or am I limited to only processing my grapes where they're grown?
Well, that would be, that the use would be established that you're growing grapes, so that would be a farm use. That
Right.
you have that with, so.
Can I send them somewhere else to be processed?
Yes, of course you can.
Is that what that says?
Mr. Chair and Dr. Zerniak, what it means is if you have an agricultural operation and you want to do processing of your own, you don't have to fall under a commercial zoning district. But if you're processing, if you have a processing center for agricultural products, but you don't do any growing of your own, you're processing somebody else's, then you would likely need a commercial district or a special use permit of some kind.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going down to agricultural processing facility.
Wait a minute, let's go back a little bit here.
Pardon me?
Onions, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Does that fall under Ag 1? It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's ag.
So I didn't grow those onions, but I'm taking them somewhere else to be cleaned and processed, right?
So
Yeah.
Christine, if I understood what you said correctly, where that processing facility is, has to be under a commercial zone. It can't just be an ag zone.
Right. Yeah. Yes. So what I'm saying is that doesn't mean that you can only process if you have a growing operation and you're processing your own. You can still send it somewhere else. It just, what would be the difference is what zoning category it falls under. Agricultural operations have a lot of leeway. They can do a lot of different things if they have on-site farming. But if you're going to have a processing center, which is probably an intense use, you wouldn't just be able to do it in any zoning district unless it's for your own products that you're growing on your farm. So you can still send it somewhere else, and there would be other facilities where you could send it to. They may not, they may have to have a different zoning district, though.
But what you're saying there is that adding for on-site farm operations only, on-site, but if I've got several off-sites where I grow the same product, I can't process it at this one site unless I go commercial?
You know, that's a question that comes up, and we pretty much made a determination that if it's for if you have a very large farming operation and you have different facilities, you can send them, if you have a processing center on one site, you can send your own to that one site, and it would still fall under the agricultural.
Yes, please step forward.
Kevin Lutz again. Yeah, it has nothing to do with cannabis, but, you know, when I had a facility up north in cannabis, and we're surrounded by a lot of chili farmers, right? A lot of those chili farmers do their own processing on site, but in order to make that commercially viable, they also do processing for other people, right? It's not just that they have land over here, they process here, they have land over here, but they do it for everybody in the valley. And if you limit that and say that, well, you know, they're on ag property and they're processing their own, but to be commercially viable, they have to do it for their neighbors. You're just telling them now that they have to rezone their property. Right?
They'd be grandfathered in.
Right, but if I wanted to, if I had a farm and I have a chili farm and I buy 10 acres next to me and now I'm large enough, right, to do chili processing on my own, but I need that extra income from processing neighbors, I would have to get that rezoned in order to do that processing for my neighbors, right? That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Chair, and bottom line, I mean, this is just to clarify the change that we did on the land use matrix. So basically what we're trying to avoid is somebody buying a 5-acre vacant piece of land, you know, next to, you know, one of the state highways, and then claiming that, oh, well, we don't need a zone change because, you know, I'm sending all my stuff there. So, I mean, you can't just build a facility to process pecans on a vacant piece of lot that was never used for pecan farming. That's basically what we're trying to say. Okay, you can do it, but you just have to go through the zone change. Versus somebody who wants to build a facility within their existing 100 acres of orchards, you know. That's the main difference. We're just trying to clarify the change that we were trying to do on the land use matrix, so it reflects on the definition of where you know, agriculture, packaging, or warehousing or processing should be allowed.
Okay.
But, for example, if we're processing our grapes on our property, and our neighbor's also growing grapes, and they don't want to market them, send them all the way to Denman, they would rather I process them for them. I can't do it because I don't have the proper zoning, is that what you're saying? And I don't mean me personally, because I have the proper zoning.
You do have the zoning.
Mr. In that situation would have to go through rezoning.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Fisher, no, that's not the case. Typically, we don't find out if you're processing for your neighbor, but if somebody came to me and requested a determination, I would probably say that still falls under the agricultural use because it's.
Because I have the grapes.
Right, because you have the grapes, you're processing your own, and you can use your facility to help your neighbor. It's still considered the agricultural use.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go, again,
Well, that seems a little iffy to me. It's nitpicky. What if the other neighbor complains?
You know, now we're getting into a lot of semantics here, but, you know, the bottom line is, it's rare that anyone would ask. If you already have an agricultural operation, you're processing your own products, and you're helping out a friend or a neighbor, they're not gonna come and ask, can I do that? When it becomes an issue is when somebody, like Albert said, has a vacant piece of property and they build a structure for processing of agricultural products, but it's clear that there is no agricultural use on the property. They're not growing anything there. They're not gonna be processing anything that was grown there. That's something that sticks out to us. But, you know, what the farming community does, how they process their own products, how they help each other out, that's really not something that they're gonna come and ask us every single time. Oh, my neighbor wants me to help them out, or, you know, a friend down the road. They're not gonna be coming to us to ask those questions. So it's very unlikely that we would have to make a determination about that.
you know, it just seems to me that we don't want to be over restrictive. Well, I don't believe in that. I believe that we should have freedom within limitations, right? But at the same time, it just seems like we don't want to wrap our cord around the axle and come to a screeching halt, you know, and then we have to go to district court, right?
Yeah, So Christina, it sounds like it's more an issue of scale. I mean, if Mel asked me to process 2 acres of grapes for him, that's one thing. If I'm processing 300 acres of grapes for people all around me and I'm getting paid for it, that's then a commercial activity.
Well, yes, but it really has to do with legal case law surrounding agricultural uses. Agricultural uses are protected, and so they're allowed to do basically any use that supports their operation without having to have a commercial zone. They can do it as part of their operation. where it becomes outside of that allowable use is when you have a completely separate piece of property where you're not doing farming and you're trying to do uses that are not compatible with the surrounding area. And so that's where the difference is. And we're not changing anything to the way to what uses are allowed or how we're allowing agricultural uses. The only thing we're doing is providing a definition.
You know, if someone were to want to build this facility for packaging only and processing, they would have to have a building permit. And in that building permit, they would say what they were going to do, and then you would look at the property and say, this property is not commercially zoned, therefore you cannot put in this commercial facility. That would be your stop right there. It seems by adding this, we may not here have the intent to do anything to the agricultural community, but what about the next group that comes in? And the code's there, and so now we're gonna be stuck with it. I just caution about putting in too many restrictions.
Yeah, and you're correct, that's not our intent, but this is not just an independent definition. There's a table of permissible uses that defines all of those uses, where they're allowed. And this is just to clarify those uses and the definitions, the way they work with the table. But I see what you're saying, and perhaps we can add some language here so that we can clarify that this should be interpreted in conjunction with the table, so that if you have an on-farm operation, it's allowed in that use or in that zoning category, and make the distinction between an independent facility that is not supporting a farming operation. And we can look at that and make sure that we're clear.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So just an example. If a farmer has 100 acres and he needs more space to process his chili and buys 5 acres 3 miles from his original 100 acres, and it's zoned agricultural, does he still have to get a commercial use permit for that? Or would it be okay for him to continue his operations without having to get a commercial use permit?
I believe that that's where the ag assessment comes in. If the property has an ag assessment, then it's for farming, then it would be allowed.
Okay, but if it's not, then he would have to, if it's zoned, maybe say residential or.
He has a satellite property. You're saying he has a satellite property that he wants to do his processing on.
Sure.
And it has ag assessment, and it's zoned for that. And it's just supporting his farm. I believe he can do that.
Would be okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sean, on that one, on accessory dwelling, is the rental or I mean, for residual income, right? If the property is big enough to do an accessory dwelling without violating any code, I mean, is that person, that property owner, allowed to do that or not?
Chair Acosta. Yes, sir. I think what they're trying to do at this time is just modify what was in the original language, because the accessory dwelling could not be used for commercial sheltering or rental. All right, I'll sit down. So that's all that it's modifying. So you can rent it out. That's all that we're trying to do, is clarify that it can be used for an Airbnb, short-term rental, and such.
Okay, so the next one was agricultural processing facility. It's the same thing we're adding for farm operations only. And then farming and ranching we're deleting processing, packaging, warehousing from the definition. So it's just farming and ranching. And then the group home, we're reducing the number of occupants from 6 to 5. That's to correlate with the building code. And then wrecking services, we're modifying the definition to eliminate dismantling and only allowing storage of vehicles. Addition, we added this definition. And agricultural animals, we added a definition for that. And agritourism, we added a definition for that. Do you want me to read the definitions?
We had, in our definition, we had a definition of large animals. In the
Yes.
ETZ, am I correct?
Yes, we do. It's in the UDC. We do have a definition for large animals. I just added one for agricultural animals.
Because I remember that there was a case way back on, I think that that they had an ostrich, or no, they had a giraffe, I think.
We had one, we had a case that we had the pig.
Janine, help me out
We
here.
had the pot-belly pig with and the goose and the chicken, and that were making a lot of noise. We had that one come up.
I've been here for a while, you know. So.
We have to
I
have,
remember
we
some of
have
these
to have
cases,
a
but- okay.
definition, because
Yeah, go
we,
ahead. Keep
this
going.
comes up. We had a gentleman that came in, and he didn't want his neighbor putting goats on his property. But he had a large enough property to put over 50 goats on the property. And so he was really upset. So he was going with us back and forth, and he talked to me, he talked to Christina, he just didn't like it, and he didn't want to do it, but he could have that. Okay, next, we're adding the campground definitions, and we're adding the primitive, semi-primitive, semi-developed, and developed campgrounds. So, and we got this from Chaffee County, Colorado, the definitions. And we're adding a definition for a campsite, and the canopy, we're adding that because of the street vendors, the food trucks and stuff like that, because we have a case where there's a canopy that they put up and it's permanent and they have to take it off. So that's the reason why we had this definition in there. And then we add a definition for caretaker, adult and child.
So do they need a building permit for a canopy?
Yes, they do, unless it's temporary, that they could take it down. But if it's a physical structure.
Oh, I see, okay.
But that would be under human services, right?
Well-
Caretaker?
Pardon me?
They would have to apply for a permit for that.
Yeah. We
Department
have
of
a,
Human Services.
okay. And then dwelling unit efficiency, and this is just a sleep living room that they have. A definition for environmental improvement division, an event center, and a food handler's card. We didn't have that definition in there, and that's required for them to get their business registration for their food trucks. What?
They don't have to have a food handler's license, the food trucks?
They have to have one. We just didn't have a definition in the UDC, so we're adding that definition in there so that we can give to, when they ask where does it say it in the UDC, we can say, here's the definition, what it is.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Right? Well, we have to define it anyway.
And then we added a definition for a food vending vehicle. They have different kinds, and some they'll get one of those like tough shed, and they'll put it on a trailer and lug it around, or they have a proper food truck. So we added that, and then we've had questions about glamping, so we put that in there too. It's another thing, a form of camping. And then for ground set, for the mobile home installation permits, we added a definition for that. And a definition for mobile food vendor.
Can you, what's the difference between a food vending vehicle and a mobile food vendor?
The vendor is the person
Oh,
selling.
one's a vehicle, one's a person. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
And then we added a definition for outdoor recreational event, personal care services, and push carts, and also vending carts. Because there's a mix-up with the push carts and then the vending vehicles, the ones that you drive, the food trucks and stuff like that. So push carts, you know, they can sell ice cream and stuff like that in their neighborhood. You know, they can sell to
So
the,
you got a typo there.
where is it?
And
Ice cream, not ice create.
Okay,
the food vending vehicle,
okay.
is there a limitation on how long that food vending vehicle can be parked at that place?
We don't have a limit on times or anything like that, but they do have to remove the vehicle. It cannot stay in that one place. They have to take it home and then come back for it to be a food vending truck. It cannot stay permanent.
It is not a permanent.
Right. It's something that can be, it's temporary, that they can move back and forth. If it becomes a permanent, then they have to get the zoning for it. They have to get, you know, the permits, all that stuff for it, so.
But there is a permit for putting it there permanently.
They have to get, to be able to, they have to have it in a commercial or industrial zoned property. They have to have permission from whoever owns the property that they can locate there. They have to have an area where they can set up their, you know, their canopy or whatever, and not have not conflict with the site triangle, the clear site triangle. They can't do that, and that it doesn't obstruct the traffic coming in and out for the food truck. So they can do that. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, your permit from the owner, that, and it has to be zoned accordingly.
Yes, they can locate on a commercial or industrial zone. And then personal care services, puzzle room, that's a question that's been coming up a lot for Sean, so we put a definition for that. Sleeping unit is another thing that we put in there that's come up for Sean as well. So. Can I move on? No. Okay. And there's a definition for a tent, vending cart, and a vendor. So there's no questions about that. I don't know, did you finish reading it? And then vendor itinerant and a vendor temporary site specific. So if we had a vendor, a food truck that wants to, they stay in the same location, but they take it home at night, but they still go to the same location. That's the temporary, well, it's not temporary, it's itinerant. It would be a food vendor. The itinerant would move from place to place to place. The temporary site specific, they would be there in just a specific time in that one site. And then we had a definition for yurt. And acronyms, we just added EID. And that's it. That's all the changes.
So when was the last time we saw a yurt in Doña County covered with skins?
No, usually canvas.
It could be canvas.
Yes. Most of them are canvas.
You're saying skins are felt.
Yes, they can have them out of that also. They can buy them off of Amazon, I'm sure.
No, but I'm saying by that definition, you're limiting it to skins or felt, not canvas.
Oh, okay. We can, canvas, yeah, we'll just add canvas on there.
Or just take it out?
I think I got this definition from the APA, I'm not sure. I don't remember.
What, in Nepal?
In Nepal, yeah, Nepal, yes.
Why not just a circular dome tent stretched over a collapsible lattice framework? You don't have to mention the material.
Okay. Any questions?
Well, the only thing I'd say is if you just say tent, you have a definition for tent which says made out of cloth.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
If you call this a dome tent, I don't know, you may have to specify that it can be made out of something other than cloth.
yeah, we can change that also.
I don't know if that's an issue or not, maybe it's not.
Yeah. We didn't go too much in the semantics of all this, which,
Go ahead.
I'm done with my presentation.
That's it?
Yeah, that's
Thank
it.
your presentation.
Yes,
Well, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Kind of an eye-opener.
So what's next with this?
We're going to bring it back to the P and Z with the changes that you've asked for, and then it goes to the P and Z the BOCC
Okay.
in September
Okay.
or October.
Chair, and then also, we do have members of the public that want to address, some of the amendments as well.
Okay. Item number 6, administrative approvals. Oh,
So,
question,
Chair,
okay.
we do have-
Step forward. Sorry, I didn't see your hand go up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's okay, I'm very hard to see. Patrick Vandergriff. I represent, actually, weirdly enough, I've never done marijuana. Don't own any interest in any of them, but I've represented a massive number of marijuana people in my consulting business, and starting in Washington State and Denver, Colorado area when they first legalized it, and spreading out to other states, hundreds of them. But I also represent a lot of people on a lot of other issues. I teach building codes, continuing education. Some of your own people here have been some of my students, and by the way, you got very qualified personnel here. But I know that, and I go back to, in this case, because you notice I mentioned marijuana, I'm going back to, what was it, 350, 250?
350.
502, 350, 502. But on that particular ordinance, the gentleman here is correct that the change is certainly better than what was there. And it solves his problem. But there were, like any ordinance, when you add like a little bit of language sometimes, I'm sure that it absolutely accomplished the goal it was intended to accomplish on that day, and yet there's always unintended consequences. There's still a massive portion of areas where there are businesses that are heavily invested, in some cases tens of thousands, and in some cases even millions of dollars, where portions of their structures are suddenly found to be in violation. I would like to have the opportunity, particularly if they're planning on coming back to you, to maybe visit with Mr. Casillas, see if we can actually work together some language that tries to resolve some of those issues. Things such as long existing, pre-existing structures that had been dilapidated that are in the process of restoration, and all of a sudden this basically brings an end to that with it half done, even though there's already millions invested. Things where, quite frankly, I know it's an economic development issue for the county. I know that it employs a lot of people. So some of these unintended issues I think we need to address, and so even though we went to this change and it affects a few of them, it doesn't really affect all of them. Nor would any of us oppose the change that helped you with this issue. But we'd sure like to have that opportunity to get some input. Most of my clients, believe it or not, were never aware that the residential thing went in a year ago. And it kind of reared its ugly head. And like I say, I work in all 50 states, but it kind of reared its head to me just in the last few weeks. And it's like, whoa, that changes things. And so I think we'd like to get some stakeholders involved, or to get possibly consultants who work for a lot of the agencies or a lot of the organizations that are involved in the business. Because there's not just the cannabis growing, there's the cannabis selling, there's the cannabis processing, there's the extraction services. All of these things have their own inherent values and dangers and things that we have to look at. And I think it would be maybe helpful to get a more comprehensive overall ordinance, and at the same time try to address some of these issues where we don't suddenly take property that people have put millions in and made it worthless. I think that becomes an issue.
Well, if, Albert, if you can discuss this with him after the meeting or soon after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Albert's a gentleman. I've had exchanges with him by email and recently, and met him this morning.
Yeah.
I like him.
Thank you.
But I think you should definitely address the items that are in this recommendation for these modifications to the UDC first, so that we can move forward on that. And I'm sure there are a lot of other issues you'd like to have input on.
Well, yeah, a couple of other ones. I might even be able to help with the language where you were talking about on the processing systems to make it where it allows the cooperative, but not the full commercial independent type operation. So I'd be glad to help on that too. I've spent 50 years writing ordinances and statutes and for various states, including the state of New Mexico. I'll help you guys any way I can.
Thank you for coming.
I'm old.
Aren't we all?
Okay, staff input.
Can we just ask if there's anybody else in the public who wants to come up?
All right.
Third time's a charm, right? Kevin Lutz, I agree with this gentleman. There's, I think, a lot more that needs to go into the cannabis code and in the rules and regulations. Yeah, that change obviously helps me and the people that I work with, and it helps a lot of the small farmers. I do want to caution though, however, if you put together some type of committee to review those, with existing businesses, don't just listen to the big guys, because the big guys will try to do whatever they can to push the little guys out with rules. I just want to, and I'm sure you guys are fully aware of that. Really, the only other comment I have is in general, I've been to a few of these, and, when I look at things and I look up on the board, like, seriously, we're defining a tent, we're defining what a yurt is. No offense, but it seems ridiculous to me. Because the more definitions that you put into codes and rules and regulations, then the more explanation you're gonna need for those rules, right? And there was one like the mobile home thing, 12 to 15, who cares, number one, at least from my standpoint. But, putting in rules without explanation and without data points as to why we're doing that, those types of things really concern me just as a citizen. Doesn't matter about if it's cannabis or not. The last example is going to be the food truck. I used to have food trucks come to my store all the time in Hatch. Okay, well, what you say it's temporary, but there's no time limitation on it, right? To me, a temporary food truck, if it's got wheels, it's temporary. Right? And if the tires are blown up, it's temporary, and it can sit there at my store for 4 years and serve people that come into my parking lot for 4 years, and it's still temporary. So I guess all I'm really saying is, if we're going to put, rules and regulations into effect and into code where they can be enforced, that I think every single rule up there needs to have documentation backing it as to why. Not just here's the rule, but why is the rule there? so that when people do like come to guys like Albert and he has to defend the code, he can give us the why. He can say, this is the documentation as to why we're doing this, and this is the intent of it. That's all I have to say. Thank you guys for your time today. Appreciate it very much.
Okay. And the gentleman with the blue shirt, please step forward. Just state your name for the record.
My name is John Osborne.
Please step forward to the microphone.
My name's John Osborne. I'm an attorney who has helped out quite a few entities throughout the state, so I've read dozens of local ordinances. So I'm gonna, I won't repeat or beat a dead horse, whatever the saying is, repeat what has already been said here. I've spoken with Albert about this ordinance, and I've kind of helped a lot of folks understand the complexities between the state law and the locals. The only thing I'd really like to add is, everybody has spoken here that this ordinance may be currently written in a way that has prevented or precluded entities from getting started. And in my practice, I've told all of my clients, we're not gonna know the answer on this cannabis stuff for a long time. The pendulum swings back and forth, and it's gonna be 5 to 10 years before we actually understand the ordinances. Every local entity has a different approach, and that's enshrined in the state code. But in the state code, or in the State Cannabis Regulation Act, there is language, and I just want to let the commission know, there is language that gives the authority to locals to regulate time, place, and manner, which is what y'all have done. But I also want to express that there's also language within the Cannabis Regulation Act that says that with exception of consumption sites, locals cannot prevent or prohibit activity. They can regulate it, but the ordinances can't be either a flat-out rejection or written in a way that is so prohibitive that they can't get started. And what I've heard today and what I've heard from this ordinance, which is kind of in the cannabis community, if you will, is that it was written originally one way and kind of swung this way, and we're trying to figure out the happy medium or the balance between state control and local control and understanding that. So I just want to kind of express to the commission that while I respect, the power of the commission to regulate safety and everything, just everything that we do, also need to make sure that it's not written in a way that just straight up prohibits or prevents folks from getting started. And I hear a lot of the agricultural zone or the folks that they've always been growing chili here or whatever, and now because it's cannabis, and I get it, it's a new industry, but now there's cannabis, they can't do what they traditionally did just because it's a different plant, if you will. So that's all I really wanted to add. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. But I've been, the last few years, 4 years, been doing this for folks all throughout the state, and so that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Staff input? No? Commission input? I would like to continue with this water issue. I would like to also ask to see if we can have some work sessions or public comment as we go, and invite the experts that are experts in their field of water use. And we would like to make sure that the public knows. And I'd also like to invite, Gary Esslinger from EBID to come and give us a presentation on issues that he has encountered, and also share information regarding agricultural use, foul land, and what else that he might have to offer to give us some more information. All right. Item number 9. Chair entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you.